Chapter 333, Sword Boy and Attendant Girl. 2. If the flair of the sword boy and attendant girl was great enough, they could be accepted as a disciple as an exception once they matured. However, these situations were very rare. After entering the inner sect in her previous life, Yi Qingtang heard of such a prodigy where the sword boy was promoted to an inner sect disciple, and the name of that boy was Fei Ying. Yi Qingtang only heard some rumors regarding Fei Ying in her previous life and knew that his endowment was even greater than some of the inner sect disciples. It was just that he was from a humble family. Despite that, his endowment freed him from the limitation of his family background, and he was highly regarded by the elders. However, a while after Fei Ying became an inner sect disciple, he committed murder in the inner sect. After killing 3 inner sect disciples, he fled out of Xianling sect. Xianling sect once ordered an arrest warrant on Fei Ying. A number of disciples had gone to catch him, but all of them died in Fei Ying's hands. As the number of people Fei Ying murdered increased constantly, his name was even listed in the assassination roll. It could be said that a few years later in the previous life, Fei Ying became malefic and betrayed and fled the sect. Yi Qingtang never expected that she would actually meet Fei Ying, who just became a sword boy when she entered the inner sect a few years earlier. And this malefic who killed inner sect disciples in the future was actually her sword boy. Is there anything wrong? Fei Ying looked at Yi Qingtang anxiously. He had entered Xianling sect for about 2 years where he had been receiving lessons. Yi Qingtang was the first inner sect disciple he served, and he was very worried that she would be dissatisfied with his actions and words. Sword boys like them did not have any place before the inner sect disciples. If they caused the inner sect disciples to be unhappy, their future days would be extremely tough. Nothing. Yi Qingtang sensed the nervousness on Fei Ying's face and immediately shook her head with a smile. No matter what the rumors about Fei Ying were in the previous life, the young boy before her did not bring any sense of danger and was instead innocent and pure. Exactly because there was a possibility of sword boys and attendant girls becoming inner sect disciples, many disciples deliberately guarded against them and even treated them extremely harshly. Although Fei Ying heard Yi Qingtang, he was still unable to fully relax. Once Yi Qingtang reached the door of her room, a pretty young girl with hair tied in 2 buns stood outside the door in a perfectly straight position. Once she saw Yi Qingtang, she immediately knelt and bowed. Anai Shang greets Mississippi. Compared to Fei Ying, who carried rumors of a malefic in the previous life, Anai Shang was fair and delicate, looking at most 12 or 13. Although she was still young, her facial features were already very developed. It seemed that in a few years' time, she would become a stunning little beauty. The room is already prepared for you. Quickly go in and take a look, Mississippi. Yi Qingtang nodded slightly and entered her room. The room was rather wide with an elegant and unique furnish. There was a silver tablecloth draped on the table near the door, and the pale pink lotus embroidery on it was exceptionally attractive. Yi Qingtang took a glance of the room and turned to face Fei Ying and Anai Shang, who were standing outside the door. It is very nicely decorated. You've worked hard, thank you. It's good that you like it. You don't need to be so polite to us. It is our job to serve you, Anai Shang said in a fluster. Chapter 334, Sword Boy and Attendant Girl. 3. Yi Qingtang smiled. Turning around, she saw a dressing table in her bedroom and said, Fei Ying, move this dressing table into Anai Shang's room. Yi Qingtang's words stunned both Fei Ying and Anai Shang. Miss, how can you do this? Anai Shang could not help but panic. Yi Qingtang chuckled. Why not? I won't use it anyway. Furthermore, I intend to add a couch here. If this dressing table is here, the couch would not fit. You want to add a couch in the bedroom? Anai Shang was confused and fell into a trance when she saw Yi Qingtang's extreme beauty. Indeed, with such looks, why would she still need any makeup? Yi Qingtang nodded. I still have a silver wolf which will be sent here soon. It usually sleeps in the same room as me. Moving the couch in would be convenient for it to rest. When they entered the inner sect, all spirit pets were required to be transported by specialized people. Yi Qingtang wanted to bring the silver wolf over herself but could only head here alone first due to the sect's rules. Recalling how she was too busy with the assessment and neglected the Silver Wolf in this period of time, Yi Qingtang was worried that it would blame her. Silver Wolf. Anai Shang's face turned blank. She knew that quite a number of disciples would raise spirit pets, and there was an area to keep the spirit pets in the inner sect disciples' courtyard. However, it was her first time hearing of bringing the spirit pet into the room to sleep together with it like Yi Qingtang. Anai Shang was extremely surprised, and on the other hand, perhaps it was because Fei Ying was a boy, his eyes could not stop twinkling when he heard the words Silver Wolf. As they talked, a few handymen from the sect pushed a metal cage into the yard. "Miss, your spirit pet is transported," a handyman notified. Yi Qingtang broke out in smiles at that and walked out with Anai Shang and Fei Ying following right after. A huge wolf with a reflective silver shine all over its body was standing in a wide metal cage. If Mu Su were there then and saw his master being transported to Yi Qingtang in a cage, he might just break down immediately. Fei Ying's eyes almost popped out after seeing that silver wolf. "I've never seen such a huge silver wolf." Before he became a sword boy, he helped out in the spirit pet hall for a period of time. There were different types of spirit pets in the spirit pet hall, and the number of wolf breeds was not small. However, none of them could be compared to the silver wolf before him. Yi Qingtang opened the metal cage, and the silver wolf walked out calmly without any orders from Yi Qingtang throughout. This scene fell into the eyes of the handymen who transported the silver wolf over, and they found it rather magical. When they were transporting the silver wolf, they thought it was merely an ordinary wolf and even brought instruments to prevent the silver wolf from struggling since its owner was not by its side. Yet who knew? The silver wolf was exceptionally calm and did not require to be scolded by anyone. Throughout the transportation journey, it was quiet and did not struggle at all. "Miss, please take a look. If you've confirmed that there's nothing wrong, we will take our leave first." The handyman looked at the silver wolf, which had an extraordinary bearing. They had transported many spirit pets on usual days, but such a fierce wolf was a first. Lowering her body, Yi Qingtang ruffled the silver wolf's shiny fur with a smile and replied, "Everything is fine. Thank you for the trouble." Chapter 335. How are you doing recently? 1. Yi Qingtang smiled and brought the silver wolf into her room after the servant left. She introduced Fei Ying and Anai Shang to the silver wolf. Fei Ying was obsessed with the appearance of the silver wolf, but Anai Shang was a little intimidated. However, the silver wolf did not seem to be aggressive. Instead, it seemed to be ignoring them and stood beside Yi Qingtang. "Young lady, what's the name of your silver wolf?" Fei Ying blinked his eyes and asked. Yi Qingtang was stunned by Fei Ying's question and then realized. She did not even remember to name the silver wolf after so long. She touched her chin and stared at the silver wolf. I did not think of that. How about Snow? Wang Kai. Xiao Guai. Yi Qingtang ignored how stiff the silver wolf was. She slapped her leg and said, "Xiao Guai will do." Fei Ying and Anai Shang were stunned as they witnessed their young lad's ability of naming. However, at least Xiao Guai was slightly better than Wang Kai. Both of them were glad that their names were given by the sect. If their young lady were to name them, it would be horrible. Yi Qingtang was satisfied with the name Xiao Guai. She completely ignored the reaction of the silver wolf and called the name repeatedly. Fei Ying and Anai Shang thought that if the silver wolf could talk, it would be totally speechless by the name Xiao Guai. Fei Ying removed the dressing table according to Yi Qingtang's request and moved in the soft mattress. Anai Shang placed a box on the table. There were 10 bottles of elixirs in the box. "Young lady, these are your assigned soul condensation pills." Yi Qingtang released her hand from the silver wolf slowly. She raised her brows as she stared at the 10 bottles of soul condensation pills. The usage of the soul condensation pills was the same as the shielding elixirs given by the outer sect, but it was much more effective. One bottle of the soul condensation pills was worth 300 Xianming points. Even if the outer sect disciples wanted to purchase that, they did not have the ability to do so. However, every inner sect disciple could receive 10 bottles every month. From the perspective of elixirs, the inner sect disciples received 3,000 Xianming points more than the outer sect disciples. Yi Qingtang stared at the soul condensation pills to figure out how long they could sustain her. However, the gate of the yard was kicked open violently. The loud sound exploded beside her eyes. Yi Qingtang raised her head and saw a few disciples with inner sect clothes wandered into her yard. The first disciple was Song Juanxiu, who had an argument with her on the center of the spring at Lingxi River the other day. Fei Ying and Anai Shang were shocked by the few inner sect disciples. They panicked and looked towards Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. "Junior Sister Yi, how are you doing recently? How fortunate it is that we meet again." Song Juanxiu walked into her room, and his mouth tilted. Chapter 336. How are you doing recently? 2. I didn't expect to meet you so soon after the day at the Lingxi River. I'm rather surprised, Song Juanxiu said, and his eyes scanned through the room. Song Juanxiu just received the news of the few outer sect disciples who entered the inner sect. And Yi Qingtang was one of them. He thought that he would not see her in the inner sect for the next few years, but surprisingly, she entered the inner sect in a few months. This reminded him of the incident at the Lingxi River. The rest of the inner sect disciples who came along with Song Juanxiu were expressionless, but their eyes showed little sarcasm. "Senior brother Song," Yi Qingtang said softly. "Junior sister Yi, you just entered the inner sect, and I think you are not very familiar with the rules in the inner sect. I think I have the responsibility to remind you of something, since we have met before," Song Juanxiu said as his sight landed on the box that contained the soul condensation pills. Fei Ying and Anai Shang could sense the intentions of Song Juanxiu. Both of them were still young, and Song Juanxiu was an inner sect disciple. They stood closely beside Yi Qingtang, and their eyes were full of anxiety. Song Juanxiu sat down beside the table casually and looked towards Fei Ying and Anai Shang. "Junior sister Yi, where are the manners of the two servants beside you? They don't even know how to serve tea to the guests here?" Anai Shang trembled and apologized immediately. "I'll prepare the tea for young sir now." Anai Shang then was about to get the tea. Song Juanxiu suddenly exchanged glances with the rest of the disciples. The disciples blocked Anai Shang's way then. Anai Shang's face turned pale, as she had never experienced such a situation due to her young age. Fei Ying went forward and pulled Anai Shang to his back as he saw Anai Shang's unpleasant face. He stared at the disciples watchfully. Song Junqia's sight was cold. The identities of the sword boy and the servant were higher than those of the outer sect disciples, but they were still inferior compared to the inner sect disciples. "How dare you to stare at inner sect disciples as a sword boy and a servant?" Song Juanxiu shouted. Fei Ying and Anai Shang were stunned. Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes and pulled the two shocked children to her back. "They are still young, and they just entered the inner sect not long ago. Please forgive them if they do not behave well now, senior brother Song." Yi Qingtang explained. Song Juanxiu chuckled. "Junior sister Yi, I will not blame you if they do not know the manners, since you just entered the inner sect as well. However, someone needs to teach them. You are very kind, but you should not spoil them with your kindness. They are servants, and they should be punished when they do not respect us. Junior sister Yi, I'm doing this for your own good." Song Juanxiu threw another glance to the disciples, and they immediately pulled Fei Ying and Anai Shang over. Yi Qingtang's face changed. The sect did not allow any fights between the disciples, so Song Juanxiu would not do anything to her in the sect. Thus, he found an excuse to punish Fei Ying and Anai Shang to warn her. Song Juanxiu still resented her for the incident at the Lingxi River. Chapter 337. How are you doing recently? 3. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes as she sensed the panic from Fei Ying and Anai Shang. Fei Ying and Anai Shang were really terrified. It was easy for inner sect disciples to punish them. There were even rumors about sword boys and servants being beaten to death just because they disrespected the inner sect disciples. Fei Ying and Anai Shang stared at the disciples who were going to surround them. They felt the coldness spreading in their body as the disciples stretched their hands out. However, the moment when they were terrified, an arm blocked the incoming hands. Yi Qingtang stood right in front of them and stopped the action of the disciples. She then turned and looked at Song Juanxiu. "Song Juanxiu, Though I just entered the sect, the warden of the inner sect had told me some of the rules here. If my servant made any mistake, I would be the one to punish them. Now, you want to bypass me to punish my people, isn't that considered disobeying the rules? Yi Qingtang said rightfully. She did not intend to compromise at all. He needed to ask for her permission before touching her people. Fei Ying and An Shang were surprised as they saw Yi Qingtang standing in front of them. Song Junqia's face darkened as he did not expect Yi Qingtang to know such a rule. He then smiled suddenly. It seems like you know quite a lot here. He waved his hand, and the few disciples stepped back. Song Juanqiu then noticed the box with the soul condensation pills inside. A streak of evilness sparkled through his eyes. He suddenly took out one bottle of the soul condensation pills and stared at the bottle with interest. Junior Sister Yi, the inner sect is totally different from the outer sect, right? I think the soul condensation pills are rare in the outer sect. Song Juanqiu raised his eyes to look at Yi Qingtang. The moment he finished his words, he lifted his hand casually, but his elbow knocked the box with the soul condensation pills inside. The whole box of soul condensation pills dropped onto the ground as his elbows swung past through. The cracking sound was heard instantly as the elixirs rolled to the ground. Song Juanqiu showed an evil smile, and he pretended to be shocked. I'm so sorry. I was careless. What are you waiting for? Help Junior Sister Yi to pick up the soul condensation pills. The few disciples certainly understood his intention. They seemed to be very helpful and went forward, but the soul condensation pills on the floor were crushed to powder as they stepped around. I apologize again, Junior Sister Yi. Only these few are left. Song Juanqiu nodded in contentment as he saw the crushed soul condensation pills. He pretended to be guilty and picked up a few soul condensation pills that were full of mud. Fei Ying raged as he witnessed the precious soul condensation pills being stepped purposely by Song Juanqiu and the rest. He held Yi Qingtang's sleeves tightly. He would definitely do something on impulse if Yi Qingtang did not stop him. Young lady, this is really too extreme. Fei Ying gritted his teeth and said. He could see the intentions of Song Juanqiu at his age. Chapter 338, The Tyrant, 1. However, Yi Qingtang just shook her head. She certainly knew what Song Junqia's intentions were. Fei Ying cleaned the floor now. Fei Ying was stunned, but he could only hold his fist tightly. He swept the broken bottles and crushed soul condensation pills. He could feel his heart bleeding. Song Juanqiu felt satisfied as he stared at Yi Qingtang. She would not dare to argue with them since she was just a new inner sect disciple. The silver wolf that was standing beside Yi Qingtang witnessed everything coldly. Its sight was fierce, but the look disappeared when it looked at Yi Qingtang. There was no trace of anger on her face. Instead, a faint smile could be seen from her eyes. She took a glance at the clean floor and then looked outside. How could she not know about Song Junqia's intentions? However, if she remembered correctly, the tyrant of the inner sect should be here by now. A figure appeared at her gate just when she was thinking about that. That was a tall and arrogant young man. His face was fierce and rebellious. He walked into the room directly. He saw Song Juanqiu and the rest squeezing in the room once he entered. He frowned and asked unpleasantly, "Where is the new disciple?" Song Junqia's attention was captured by the voice. He looked over, and the whole group was stunned when they saw the young man. Feng Moli? Why did he suddenly come over? Junior brother Feng? How come you are here? Song Juanqiu tensed up as he stared at Feng Moli. Feng Moli was very impatient. He took a glance at Song Juanqiu. Do I need to report to you wherever I go? It's none of your business. Song Junqia's face clouded, but he felt awkward as Feng Moli challenged him. Feng Moli was the famous tyrant of the inner sect. His grandfather was the internal elder of the Xianling inner sect. The young man was very talented, and his abilities were one of the strongest in the inner sect. His behavior in the inner sect was rude and unreasonable, which was the reason why he was called the tyrant. Even Song Juanqiu, who had some connections with the inner sect warden, tried to avoid Feng Moli. Feng Moli was totally not interested to talk to Song Juanqiu. He scanned through the room and noticed his target. He raised his chin as he looked at Yi Qingtang. Are you the new one here? Yi Qingtang nodded. Feng Moli sized up Yi Qingtang and asked, Do you know the rules of the inner sect? Roughly. Please advise me on the areas that I do not know. Yi Qingtang responded nicely. Feng Moli was quite satisfied with Yi Qingtang's answer. The wardens and the elders should have taught you the rules of the inner sect, but today, I'm here to tell you my rules. Chapter 339 The Tyrant 2. Please go on. My rules are simple. Give me 30% of your soul condensation pills every month. Then, I will look after you if you have any troubles. Song Juanqiu just brought a group of people to show off. Now, Feng Moli was even more extreme. He came to ask for a protection fee. Song Juanqiu, whose face was unpleasant, sneered as he heard Feng Moli's words. His malicious sight landed on Yi Qingtang. He forgot about that. Feng Moli had a bad reputation in the inner sect. Asking for protection fee was a part of it. If new disciples dared to reject, Feng Moli would torture them to death. Song Juanqiu was waiting for the show to begin. He did not dare to do anything to Yi Qingtang in the sect, but Feng Moli. He had numerous ways to torture her. Now, he just needed to sit at the side and watch the show. Normal people could not even imagine the constant threat and extortion. A faint smile appeared in Yi Qingtang's eyes as she stared at the arrogant Feng Moli. Yi Qingtang spoke when Song Juanqiu was still waiting for her reaction. But, my soul condensation pills were all given to senior brother Song. Song Juanqiu, who was waiting for the show, was shocked upon hearing her words. What did she just say? Feng Moli frowned instantly. Yi Qingtang continued worriedly. I have heard of such inner sect rules. I gave all my soul condensation pills when senior brother Song asked for it just now. He said he would look after me as well. Song Juanqiu opened his eyes wide. What nonsense are you talking about? Yi Qingtang gave a perfectly guileless look to Song Juanqiu. Senior brother Song, I'm telling the truth. Did you not take all the soul condensation pills? Senior brother Feng, if you do not believe me, you can search my room. I promise there is no single bottle of the soul condensation pills in the room. I have given them all to senior brother Song. Yi Qingtang even opened her space ring in front of everyone to show that there were no soul condensation pills inside. Song Juanqiu felt as if his brain had exploded. The 10 bottles of soul condensation pills were smashed by him just now. Even the residues were cleaned by the sword boy. Feng Moli scanned through Yi Qingtang's room. He saw that the box that was supposed to contain the soul condensation pills was now empty. His face darkened, and he gazed at Song Juanqiu instantly. Song Juanqiu, what do you want? Every disciple knew that Feng Moli asked for a protection fee in the inner sect. Yet, Song Juanqiu dared to take over his business. Junior brother Feng. This is a mistake. I have never taken Yi Qingtang's soul condensation pills. Song Juanqiu's whole body froze as he was stared at by Feng Moli. He was very clear how horrifying the tyrant in front of him was. He would never dare to take over his business. Song Juanqiu wanted to beat Yi Qingtang to death now. It was obvious that she was finding trouble for him. Chapter 340. The Paragon Skill 1. Feng Moli looked at Song Juanqiu, who was trying to explain coldly. He scanned through the other few disciples standing behind Song Juanqiu. If he was not asking for a protection fee, why would he bring a group of people over to a new disciple's place? Song Juanqiu had no way to explain himself now. If he knew that Yi Qingtang would frame him earlier, he would definitely not have smashed those soul condensation pills. He did not get a single bottle of the soul condensation pills, and instead he had to face the tyrant of the inner sect. Yi Qingtang smiled as she saw Song Juanqiu's desperate face. Senior brother Feng, both of you said that you will look after me in future. I just entered the inner sect, and I want to find a stronger person to rely on. May I know, which one of you is stronger? Feng Moli sneered. His eyes were half closed, and he stared at Song Juanqiu. Senior brother Song, what do you say? A layer of red flames surrounded Feng Moli's body as he finished his words. The temperature around suddenly rose. Song Juanqiu could feel cold sweat on his back when he saw the red flames surrounding Feng Moli. The Paragon Skill. Song Junkia's brain almost exploded. Yi Qingtang was slightly surprised when she saw the flames surrounding Feng Moli's body. The Paragon skill was one of the highest skills in cultivation. Only people who possessed a yellow spirit root or better could understand the Paragon skill. People with more superior spirit roots could understand more powerful Paragon skill. There were millions of people who cultivated, and the levels of spirit root differed from each other. The Paragon skill was the power that everyone dreamed about. Only extremely talented people could understand the Paragon skill. The ability of those with the Paragon skill had entered another level. People with the Paragon skill could easily defeat opponents in the same level or with the same spirit root, or even challenge opponents of a higher level. It was just that. It was extremely difficult to understand the Paragon skill. There might be at most one out of millions. When Yi Qingtang entered the inner sect in her previous life, Feng Moli had already understood the Paragon skill. However, she did not know that he had understood the Paragon skill at such a young age. The disciples who followed Song Juanqiu opened their eyes when they saw the flame. They would never dare to challenge Feng Moli when he understood the Paragon skill. Even though they had more people, they were so shocked that no one made any sound. Junior brother Feng, we can discuss. Song Juanqiu felt that his heart was going to jump out of his chest as Feng Moli was about to use the Paragon skill. He would never dare to fight against Feng Moli. Feng Moli totally neglected Song Juanqiu. Song Juanqiu almost went insane. Others might not do anything extreme in the sect, but Feng Moli was the infamous tyrant. He was the only disciple in the Xianling sect who understood the Paragon skill. He was the most talented disciple in the sect. Every elder and sect master valued him. Even if he were to fight with other disciples in the sect, he was the only one who might not face any punishments. Junior brother Feng, I broke the rules today. The 10 bottles of soul condensation pills will be my apologizing gift. Song Juanqiu, who was showing off in front of Yi Qingtang previously, was entirely frightened by Feng Moli. Chapter 341. The Paragon Skill, 2. Song Juanqiu immediately took out 10 bottles of his own soul condensation pills and placed them on the table. It seemed as if Feng Moli's hand would land on his head if he were to delay it for any longer. Song Juanqiu never imagined that he would provoke Feng Moli when he only wanted to give Yi Qingtang a lesson. He lost his reputation and had to compensate 10 bottles of soul condensation pills. He had to hold all his complaints. Feng Moli lifted his eyebrows as he saw the 10 bottles of soul condensation pills on the table. He then looked towards Yi Qingtang. Now you know who's stronger? Yi Qingtang was amused by Feng Moli's arrogant face. Her face remained serious, and she said, I shall thank you first for looking after me in future, senior brother Feng. Without the Paragon skill, Feng Moli's ability might not be the strongest in the inner sect, but still, no one could compare with his talent. People like Song Juanqiu were not even qualified to fight with Feng Moli. Feng Moli felt satisfied and provoked Song Juanqiu. This person's soul condensation pills will be mine in future. If I see you again, you should know the consequences. Song Juanqiu did not dare to explain to Feng Moli anymore. He could only nod his head heavily and said, Of course, junior brother Feng. I have something on, and I shall leave first. He then escaped the place confoundedly with the other disciples. Feng Moli dispersed the flame around his body after Song Juanqiu left. The temperature in the surroundings returned to normal conditions. I had to waste my energy and time to talk to him. The extra soul condensation pills will serve as compensation for your terrible observation. What a joke to compare the useless Song Juanqiu with me. Feng Moli took all the 10 bottles of soul condensation pills that Song Juanqiu left and placed them into his space ring. Fei Ying was confused. He thought that Feng Moli was kind as he challenged Song Juanqiu. However, he was more relentless. He took all the 10 bottles of the soul condensation pills. Yi Qingtang did not show any detestation against Feng Moli. She smiled and said, Of course, they should be the compensation for my ignorance. Feng Moli glanced at Yi Qingtang. At least you understand the situation. Though he got what he wanted from other new disciples just now, those people's reactions were not as obedient as those from junior sister Yi here. Remember, 3 bottles of soul condensation pills every month. Feng Moli withdrew his sight and left the sentence before he wandered out of the yard. After Feng Moli disappeared from the yard, Fei Ying finally opened his mouth and spoke. Young lady, both of them are bullying us. I thought that Feng Moli is a good guy. Who knew that he was worse? He took all the 10 bottles of soul condensation pills. Fei Ying's eyes were red as Feng Moli was even more aggressive than Song Juanqiu. Yi Qingtang smiled at Fei Ying's angry face. She could make the connection between the little guy who could not even hide his thoughts with the killer who murdered disciples of the same sect. Just let him take them. Anyway, the soul condensation pills were not mine. How come you are angry when I'm completely fine? Yi Qingtang made fun of Fei Ying and said. Chapter 342, The Paragon Skill, 3. Fei Ying still wanted to say something, but then he remembered that the 10 bottles of soul condensation pills that Feng Moli took away belonged to Song Juanqiu. He felt more relieved. He looked at Yi Qingtang and then the yard. He was curious about the red flames surrounding Feng Moli's body previously. Young lady, is Feng Moli very strong? I saw that Song Juanqiu was afraid of him just now. Aren't they all inner sect disciples? How come Song Juanqiu, who brought more people, would be afraid of Feng Moli alone? Yi Qingtang replied. There is a difference in the abilities of inner sect disciples. What could Song Juanqiu do even though he had more people? Feng Moli understood the Paragon Skill. How would Song Juanqiu dare to challenge him? The Paragon Skill? Fei Ying was stunned and said, I heard this before from the wardens at the Spirit Pet Hall. It seems to be a very powerful skill. Only people with a yellow spirit root or above can understand the powerful skill that belongs to him only, right? Yi Qingtang nodded and said, more accurately, the possibility is extremely small. Most people could only dream about the Paragon Skill and would never be able to understand that. Feng Moli was the only disciple in the Xianling sect who understood the Paragon Skill. That was the reason why Feng Moli could be so aggressive in the inner sect. He was the key focus of the elders and the sect master based on his talent and the Paragon Skill. Could be said that no one in the inner sect dared to provoke Feng Moli. Yi Qingtang did not have a spirit root in her previous life, so she could not have learned the Paragon Skill. However, this time, though she only possessed an orange spirit root, she was confident that she could nurture her spirit root, and then, she might have the chance to understand the Paragon Skill that she did not have the chance to touch in her previous life. Fei Ying's eyes showed his eagerness for the Paragon Skill. He looked at his abdomen and said, I'm not sure whether I will have the chance to understand the Paragon Skill. Yi Qingtang looked at Fei Ying in a complex way. Even though Fei Ying was just a sword boy, he possessed a high-quality green spirit root. He was not born into a renowned family. If he was, he would have definitely been able to enter the sect as an official disciple based on his potential. Yi Qingtang did not know much about Fei Ying's story in her previous life. She only knew that he murdered his senior and junior brothers. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. The Fei Ying in front of her now was totally different from the one in the rumor in her previous life. She did not know what happened to Fei Ying in her previous life that resulted in him killing other disciples. Fei Ying did not notice Yi Qingtang's gaze. He chatted with Ni Shang for a while and left for his duties. Yi Qingtang sat in the hall and lowered her eyes. Feng Moli just released a little breath of the Paragon Skill, and it had such great results. How powerful would it be if he revealed the entire Paragon Skill? The Paragon Skill. Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes as she stared at the silver wolf beside her. She hugged its neck and murmured, Xiao Guai, do you think I will understand the Paragon Skill in the future? The silver wolf did not have any reactions, but its eyes were cold when Yi Qingtang did not look at it. Perhaps it was because of the fear of Feng Moli. Song Juanqiu was much more obedient in the coming days and did not appear in front of Yi Qingtang. There were usually many cultivation periods in the inner sect, and because there were plenty of highly skilled people, all the disciples were busy cultivating. Yi Qingtang had already been through everything in her previous life and was naturally familiar with the inner sect's matters. Thus, she was able to get used to the things here quickly. Regardless of whether it was the outer or inner sect, sex would be relatively easier on new disciples who just entered. They did not need to accept any appointed missions by the sect. While Yi Qingtang lost her Juyuan elixirs because of Song Juanxiu, the few thousand Xianming points that she still had left previously was enough to use in this 1 month. Thus, it was not urgent for her to accept rewarded missions as well. This day, Yi Qingtang just stepped out of the practice hall and coincidentally bumped into Ji Xianyuan, who was about to enter. Ji Xianyuan entered the inner sect together with Yi Qingtang, and although they were opponents who sparred before, Ji Xianyuan deeply admired Yi Qingtang's skills after that match and did not have any prejudice against her. "Junior sister Yi, are you accustomed to the inner sect?" Ji Xianyuan asked Yi Qingtang. "Fairly. I heard that you went to the Spirit Consonance River yesterday. How do you feel?" Yi Qingtang asked with a smile. She still respected Ji Xianyuan deeply. The spirit energy in the Spirit Consonance River is rich, and it naturally is the best spot for cultivation. Ji Xianyuan spoke about the Spirit Consonance River with adoration. He had heard about the Spirit Consonance River since he was in the outer sect, but the fee to enter the Spirit Consonance River for outer sect disciples was too high, and even he would not be willing to spend lavishly. Thus, he only first entered the Spirit Consonance River after becoming an inner sect disciple. At that thought, Ji Xianyuan admired Yi Qingtang's boldness for spending tens of millions of Xianming points to cultivate in the Spirit Consonance River. If it were him, he might not be able to be so resolute. However, I happened to meet some familiar people from the outer sect on my way to the Spirit Consonance River yesterday. I heard that something seemed to have happened in the outer sect these few days, Ji Xianyuan said. "Oh, what is it?" Yi Qingtang asked casually. In the past few days, some disciples in the outer sect disappeared unknowingly within the sect. Wardens and elders have investigated for a few days and did not find any clues. Wasn't there a period of time previously where disciples who were out on missions disappeared as well? But, somehow, this time it happened within the sect. Ji Xianyuan said. Ji Xianyuan found it strange and continued saying some more things. However, Yi Qingtang's mind was no longer on his words. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster updates? Better experience please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. In the past few days? Calculating it, was that not right after she entered the inner sect? The reason for the various sect disciples' disappearance during their mission was because of the resurrection of the Blood Moon sect, but this time, disciples actually vanished within the sect. Thought suddenly struck Yi Qingtang. She had just entered the inner sect, and outer sect disciples disappeared without a reason. Apart from that person, who else was capable of doing this? Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes immediately. After bidding Ji Xianyuan goodbye, she hurried out to the outer sect. Outer sect disciples did not have the authority to step into the inner sect, but it was an easy feat for inner sect disciples to go to the outer sect. In the outer sect, the Blood Moon sect elder who was in Zhou Chu's skin was walking together with a few other outer sect disciples. "Senior brother Zhou, what exactly does the sword intent that the warden has been talking about these few days mean?" A disciple looked at the Blood Moon sect elder. Previously, he only thought that Zhou Chu was a useless scumbag, but now, he felt that this senior brother Zhou was pretty well versed after interacting with him in this period of time. Chapter 344, A Beating a Day, 2. The Blood Moon sect elder replied. How can swordsmanship be explained so simply? With the sword and sword intent in the heart, the said sword intent means, although there was a great loss in the Blood Moon sect elder's skills he had cultivated for a long time. Even if he randomly said something, it was extremely profound to those outer sect disciples. With just his talking skills, he won the compliments of many disciples in the outer sect. As the Blood Moon sect elder was about to make a high-sounding speech, he suddenly saw a familiar figure walking in his direction at top speed, which cut him from talking immediately. "Senior brother Zhou? Why are you not talking anymore?" Those disciples were still staring at the Blood Moon sect elder and waiting for him to continue talking but saw his face stiffen. They finally realized and looked in the direction that the Blood Moon sect elder was looking at. This look gave those disciples a shock. Isn't that Senior Sister Yi? Although Yi Qingtang entered the sect for only a short time, she was an inner sect disciple now, and outer sect disciples like them naturally addressed her as senior sister. Yi Qingtang's entrance into the inner sect caused a stir in the outer sect, and many were still discussing the matter until that day. However, no one had expected that Yi Qingtang, who just entered the inner sect for a few days, would actually return to the outer sect. It should be known that disciples who entered the inner sect were different from outer sect disciples like them, who would still return here. Why is senior sister Yi back? Everyone was filled with curiosity, and they did not sense that the Blood Moon sect elder's face had already darkened unknowingly. Junior brother Zhou, I've something to say. Come with me for a while, Yi Qingtang said coldly the moment she reached the Blood Moon sect elder. The disciples looked at the Blood Moon sect elder, who had a frozen expression. The Blood Moon sect elder's lips twitched, and he replied rather stiffly. All right. Then Yi Qingtang brought the Blood Moon sect elder to a place without anyone. The disciples stared blankly at the back view of those two people. They did hear of the tension between Yi Qingtang and Zhou Chu, as well as the rumors that Yi Qingtang had something to do with his brother's death. Now that Yi Qingtang suddenly came to look for Zhou Chu, was she here to pick a quarrel with him? Just the thought of it caused them to feel numb. Right now, Yi Qingtang was an official inner sect disciple. How was Zhou Chu her opponent? As everyone guessed, Yi Qingtang had already led the Blood Moon sect elder to an empty place. What are you looking for me for? The Blood Moon sect elder looked at Yi Qingtang in annoyance. Without Yi Qingtang in the outer sect over the past few days, he was able to live very comfortably. Yet, who knew that this girl would actually return here again today? Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes at the frustrated Blood Moon sect elder. What am I looking for you for? I've only been in the inner sect for a few days, and some outer sect disciples disappeared unknowingly. Shouldn't you give me an explanation for this? There was a slight change in the Blood Moon sect elder's eyes after hearing Yi Qingtang's words, although he initially had a frustrated expression. His eyes shifted to a side as he mumbled. Why are you asking me for an explanation for the disappearance of those disciples? It has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with you? Yi Qingtang scoffed. Do you think I believe that? Chapter 345. A Beating a Day, 3. I can't help it if you don't believe me. I really didn't do anything. The Blood Moon sect elder's eyes fleeted. Yi Qingtang looked coldly at the Blood Moon sect elder, who tried to find excuses. After scanning the surrounding and ensuring there was no one nearby, she sprinted to the Blood Moon sect elder's front, and before he could react, she grabbed his collar and threw him over her shoulder. With a loud bang, the Blood Moon sect elder immediately saw stars from the beating. What are you doing? Yi Qingtang lifted the Blood Moon sect elder who was grimacing in pain. Don't think that I don't know how you've been looking at the disciples here as though you want to eat them up alive ever since you entered the sect. If I wasn't watching over you, you would have taken so many lives already. I'm accused. The Blood Moon sect elder was adamant to not admit it. Yi Qingtang narrowed her threat-filled eyes. I don't care whether you've done it or not. I'm telling you that you must enter the inner sect of Xianling sect in a month. Otherwise, I'll beat you up until all your teeth drop. She did not think that he would be so bold to kill disciples within the sect. If anyone found out about it, not only would his identity as the Blood Moon sect elder be revealed, but she would also get into trouble. Enter the inner sect? The Blood Moon sect elder suddenly looked at her. I can't even beat you the other time. How would I have the ability to enter the inner sect? Even if you wanted me to enter, you should help me to regain my powers somehow. Ow. Before the Blood Moon sect elder finished his sentence, he was punched by Yi Qingtang, and tears spilled instantly due to the pain. Goddamn Yi Qingtang. If not for the fact that my skills are not yet recovered, I would definitely chop her into pieces. I don't care what means you use, but I'm telling you that from today on, I'll give you a beating a day every day until you enter the inner sect. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes that were overflowing with threat. If this fellow continued to remain in the outer sect, God knows how many outer sect disciples would be killed by him. She must get him into the inner sect. The assessment has already ended. Where am I going to find a way to enter the inner sect? Tears were streaming from the Blood Moon Sect elder's eyes after being punched by Yi Qingtang, and he wished he could scold all her ancestors. It was really a case of how a man who lost position and influence would be subjected to indignity. Find a way yourself. This is all I have to say. Yi Qingtang uttered. The Blood Moon Sect elder curled his lips and thought to himself, "You've entered the inner sect already? How would you have the time to beat me up? Like hell he'll believe you." He did not know that Yi Qingtang already pretty much guessed his thoughts. Looking at his indifferent behavior, Yi Qingtang's lips curled up, and a devilish smile broke out on her face. "I live up to my words. Although I'm in the inner sect, senior brother Yun, senior brother Qin, and the rest are still in the outer sect. Luckily, it's almost the end of the year, and they don't have anything on hand. I believe they'll be very willing to practice with you every day." The Blood Moon Sect elder's face darkened immediately. Yi Qingtang did enter the inner sect, but her group of senior brothers and sisters were still in the outer sect. If Yi Qingtang gave orders, the Blood Moon Sect elder could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. Although he absorbed the essence of a few outer sect disciples, which made up a little for his loss, the skills of Lin Long, Gu Yanxiu, Qin Huan, and Yun Shu were still above average in the outer sect. If they all ganged up on him, he would only be beaten up. Chapter 346. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. 1. At the thought that he would receive a beating every day as long as he was still in the outer sect, the Blood Moon Sect elder's heart turned cold instantly. This girl was clearly a disciple from an orthodox sect. Why was it that she was even more shameless than he, a heretic sect elder, when it came to threatening people? "I'll go look for my senior brothers later. You can slowly think about how you want to live from now on." After finishing her sentence, Yi Qingtang released the Blood Moon Sect elder and took a glimpse at him with a spurious smile. Then, she turned around and left, seeming to be headed to brief Qin Huan and the rest. The Blood Moon Sect elder watched Yi Qingtang's departing back view and was extremely aggrieved. What kind of bad luck did he have to meet Yi Qingtang, such a devilish person, in Deer City? If he knew he was going to meet Yi Qingtang in Deer City, he would have definitely made a detour. But now, it was all too late. After meeting Yi Qingtang, the Blood Moon Sect elder originally thought he was lucky and felt that Yi Qingtang was only scaring him. Yet, the next morning, Qin Huan and Gu Yanxiu appeared before him with a look that harbored evil designs and invited him for a practice. The last bit of luck he felt was completely crushed. When the Blood Moon Sect elder crawled up with a swollen face, his heart completely crumbled as he watched Qin Huan and Gu Yanxiu bid him goodbye. "Yi Qingtang, you're ruthless." The Blood Moon Sect elder finally saw it clearly that Yi Qingtang was real this time. If he did not find a way to enter the inner sect quickly, his life would end right here, much less find an opportunity to absorb essence from other disciples. Thus, the Blood Moon Sect elder could only hug his head that swelled into the size of a pig's head and ran to the elder's hall, puffing. In the elder's hall, Elder Huang had been in a good mood these few days. Yuan Wei and Yi Qingtang gave him face in the inner sect assessment a few days ago. Being in a good mood, he was more patient and kind when interacting with other disciples. "Elder Huang, I heard that Yuan Wei improved quite a lot recently?" The elder from the outer sect's Array faction asked with a smile. Yuan Wei's natural endowment was extremely high. Now that he was accepted into the sect, he obviously would not be bad if he trained hard, Elder Huang said cheerily. Now that Yi Qingtang entered the inner sect, he thought that if Yuan Wei worked hard this year, he would definitely be able to enter the inner sect next year. As the two elders were chatting, a figure suddenly appeared outside the elders' hall. Before they fixed their eyes on the person, they suddenly realized that the person standing outside the hall was actually a disciple who was badly battered. The Blood Moon Sect elder stood outside the elders' hall with a swollen face and looked at Elder Huang. "Elder Huang, I have something to report." Elder Huang frowned. "What is it?" "I wish to attempt the Thunder Array." The Blood Moon Sect elder tried to remain calm, but there was a wave of emotions in his heart. He was a dignified Blood Moon Sect elder, and yet he was actually forced to go through such misery in the sect by a little girl. Even spitting a mouthful of blood would not dispel all his pent-up frustration. Thunder Array? Elder Huang and the Array faction's elder from his side were taken aback. The Thunder Array was one of the array formations that Xianling sect provided for disciples to challenge. Up to this date, the number of disciples who could solve the Thunder Array could be counted with a hand, and there were barely any who could do so in the inner sect. This outer sect disciple dared to speak so wildly and challenge the Thunder Array. Chapter 347. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse too. What is your name? The Array faction elder asked. Zhou Chu, replied the Blood Moon sect elder. The Array faction elder frowned slightly. There were some disciples in the outer sect who were learning about the profound meaning behind array formations, but Zhou Chu's name was not in the list. You want to challenge the Thunder Formation? Are you aware that this array formation is dangerous and that you may lose your life in the array if you're not careful? Although the Thunder Array was provided for the sect disciples to challenge, those who dared to attempt it had learned about array formations. Moreover, the Thunder Array was lethal, and if the disciple had not grasped the main points, he or she would definitely be either killed or severely injured. Forget about Zhou Chu, a disciple whose name was not recorded in the Array faction at all. Only a few of the disciples who studied array formations dared to attempt it. I am aware. Please give me a chance, elder. The Blood Moon sect elder felt extremely aggrieved. He was a dignified Blood Moon sect elder, yet had to be so subservient and speak humbly to two useless sect elders. If this was in the past, he could kill them with just the wave of a finger. If not for that goddamn Yi Qingtang's threat, he would only attempt the whatsoever Thunder Array if he had nothing better to do. In terms of skills, the Blood Moon sect elder was simply unable to enter the top 10 on the excellence roll, and even if he did, he had already missed the assessment this year. To prevent Yi Qingtang from sending people to beat him up daily, he could only use this method. Was it not just an inner sect of a sect? Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. As a Blood Moon sect elder, would he need to use brute force if he wanted to go in? Elder Huang and the Array faction elder exchanged a look. Although they thought that Zhou Chu was a little weird, they eventually agreed after considering for a while. After all, the Thunder Array was originally for disciples to challenge. After obtaining the permission from the two elders, the Blood Moon sect elder finally attempted the Thunder Array. Watching the Blood Moon sect elders' brave and heroic back view, Elder Huang and the Array faction elder could only shake their heads. They only felt that Zhou Chu was seeking death and was not too bothered with him. The two elders returned to the topic that they were previously talking about. However, before they talked for long, a warden rushed over with a weird expression. Reporting elders that Zhou Chu. What happened? Is he injured in the Thunder Array? Just order a physician to take a look. That will do, said the Array faction elder calmly. However, the warden shook his head hurriedly. No, Zhou Chu is not injured, and he already solved the Thunder Array. What? The Array faction elder was alarmed. Zhou Chu actually really solved the Thunder Array? How much time had passed since he left? Then, the Array faction elder's expression changed slightly. Looking at Elder Huang, who was similarly surprised, he said, Elder Huang, I did not expect Zhou Chu to solve the array. Moreover, he solved it in such a short amount of time. I need to report this to Elder Qin of the inner sect immediately. I'll take my leave first. Then, the elder from the outer sect Array faction left. Elder Huang was a little dazed. Solving the Thunder Array was something that only elite inner sect disciples who specialized in array formations had a possibility of accomplishing. Unexpectedly, Zhou Chu actually had such amazing talent in array formations. The Blood Moon sect elder solved the Thunder Array within an extremely short span of time, displaying his high attainment in array formations. This traveled into the ears of Elder Qin, the inner sect's Array faction elder, and on that afternoon, the Blood Moon sect elder was given an exception to be accepted as a disciple under Elder Qin. There was a burst of discussions in the outer sect the moment the news was passed out. The very first moment the Blood Moon sect elder was brought into the inner sect, he saw Yi Qingtang, who was staring at him with a devious smile. "We meet again, senior brother Zhou." Yi Qingtang smiled devilishly. She did not think that the Blood Moon Sect elder would enter the inner sect so quickly. It seemed that senior brother Qin and the rest did take care of him relatively thoroughly. The Blood Moon Sect elder whom Yi Qingtang did dirty to could only clench his teeth secretly. "Only ghosts would want to meet you. How I wish I do not need to see you again for the rest of my life." Chapter 348. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. 3. No matter how badly the Blood Moon Sect elder wished to not see Yi Qingtang again, he had already entered the inner sect then, and there was nowhere he could hide even if he wanted to. Since he just entered the inner sect, his allocated area of residence was coincidentally right next to Yi Qingtang's, and the distance between the 2 yards was at most a few steps only. The Blood Moon Sect elder stood outside his own courtyard and looked at Yi Qingtang, who was standing a few steps away from him, with an utterly dark expression as though he had just swallowed a fly. Forget about sneaking off to absorb an inner sect disciple's essence. Even where he went on usual days was going to be tightly watched by Yi Qingtang. Before the Blood Moon Sect elder was done grumbling, Yi Qingtang invited herself into the Blood Moon Sect elder's yard. The Blood Moon Sect elder was allocated a sword boy and an attendant girl. Those 2 kids were not old and appeared to be about the same age as Fei Ying and Enai Sheng. Those 2 children still had a rather muddle-headed look in their eyes. Noticing that Yi Qingtang entered, they naturally identified her as an inner sect disciple as well and served her carefully. With a dark expression, the Blood Moon Sect elder sat at a table and threw a dissatisfied look at Yi Qingtang. "I've already entered the inner sect according to your request. Are you satisfied now?" Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. Yi Qingtang chuckled. Looking at the Blood Moon Sect elder's ugly expression, she was unhurried and calm, though she glanced at the 2 kids that were occupied with work outside the house. The sword boys and attendant girls in the inner sect have good natural endowments, but you better behave and not think of anything. If you ever do anything, the sect will not just drop the matter, and I will not let you off easily, Yi Qingtang said straightforwardly. The outer sect disciples could already pique the Blood Moon Sect elder's interest, and if it was in the inner sect where there was plenty of elites, the Blood Moon Sect elder would probably be dizzy just by looking at them. Guilt crept into the Blood Moon Sect elder's heart. He did eye the 2 kids here previously, but never did he expect that this thought was crushed by Yi Qingtang the moment he conceived it. "Obviously, I know that without you telling me." Even though he was seen through, he still denied in a serious manner. Yi Qingtang glimpsed at the Blood Moon Sect elder, and her lips curled into a smile. She slowly took out a bottle of elixir from her space ring and placed it before the Blood Moon Sect elder. "Take this." The Blood Moon Sect elder took a look at the bottle, and a disdainful smile broke out on his face. Throwing him a bone? Was Yi Qingtang not treating him too much of a joke? Even though his skills were not as powerful as before, these elixirs in sects were nothing to him. Yi Qingtang saw the Blood Moon Sect elder's contemptuous expression and chuckled. "This is the source of the marrow pill." When the Blood Moon Sect elder heard the word source of the marrow pill, astonishment flashed across his eyes, and the look of belittlement on his face vanished into thin air. His reaction fell into Yi Qingtang's eyes, and her eyes smiled even deeper. The source of the marrow pill was different from ordinary elixirs used to nourish the spirit root. It mainly nourished one's state of mind and recovered the lost vitality. In her previous life, Yi Qingtang did not have a spirit root, and her focus was naturally shifted to elixirs which recuperated other forces. Spirit root was no longer of any use to the Blood Moon Sect elder after resurrecting. What he needed was something which could nourish his vitality. "Why do you have the source of the marrow pill?" The Blood Moon Sect elder secretly concealed his surprise and asked in a feigned casual tone. Chapter 349. Carrot and Stick Approach. 1. The Blood Moon Sect's main cultivation technique was not based on the spirit root, and thus, most of the elixirs they desired thousands of years ago were different from other cultivators. This source of the marrow pill was one of the superior elixirs that they desired. However, The formula for this pill had been lost for years, and the Blood Moon sect had spent much effort but was still unable to find its trace even before it was exterminated. To date, the words, source of the marrow pill, were no longer in one's knowledge. Yi Qingtang was only barely over 10 years old. How would she know about the source of the marrow pill? And how was she able to have a real source of the marrow pill? A smile emerged in Yi Qingtang's eyes as she looked at the Blood Moon sect elder, who tried to maintain his composure. In her previous life, Yi Yu led a group of people to try to take Yi Qingtang's life for many years, and Yi Qingtang was forced into hiding. After an avalanche, a snowfield in the mountains collapsed, and she incidentally found a tomb that was covered with dust for thousands of years. In the tomb buried unimaginable medical books and formulas, and Yi Qingtang found the formula for the source of the marrow pill from there. The source of the marrow pill was not the only formula she found. There were countless of formulas that were highly valued. However, she was found by a group of people after hiding there for a few days. She was unable to defeat them at that time and could only escape hurriedly after taking a brief look. Thinking about it now, many medical books and ancient formulas on Earth had disappeared, but there were many stored in that tomb. It seemed that the owner of that tomb must be extremely formidable. In her previous life, Yi Qingtang only managed to read a small portion of the books, and her alchemy skills had already reached a considerably high level. If she could finish reading all of them, Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. The location of that tomb was still vivid in her memory, and she must make a trip there again this lifetime. If she did not remember wrongly, the avalanche would happen a year later, and afterward, that tomb would be discovered, and the person who stole the treasures was powerful. She must quickly raise her skills within a year, otherwise, she would not have the ability to compete with that person at that time. Yi Qingtang still remembered how powerful that person became after obtaining the treasures in the tomb. If those items fell in her hands, it would undoubtedly be an additional, huge bargaining chip for her. At that thought, Yi Qingtang stopped recollecting and looked at the doubtful Blood Moon sect elder. I refined it myself. Is there any problem? The Blood Moon sect elder looked at Yi Qingtang in disbelief. She refined it herself. If she knew how to refine the source of the marrow pill, wouldn't he be able to fly up to the sky? You don't believe me? Yi Qingtang raised a brow. Do you think I believe you? The Blood Moon sect elder asked. Yi Qingtang shrugged slightly. Want you know whether to believe me or not after you try it? Or should I say that you, a Blood Moon sect elder, have never seen the real source of the marrow pill? The Blood Moon sect elder's face darkened. He had seen the source of the marrow pill before, but it was only once. That pill was obtained by the sect master of the Blood Moon sect after much effort, and there was only one such pill. As an elder, he could only see it. Perhaps agitated by Yi Qingtang, the Blood Moon sect elder took over the bottle snappily and opened it. As the bottle was opened, a dark red pill rolled into his palm, and a faint smell of blood traveled into his nose. All it took was a moment for the Blood Moon sect elder to be alarmed. Chapter 350, Carrot and Stick Approach. 2. Regardless of its color or smell, this pill was actually exactly the same as the one that his sect master obtained that time. The disbelief that he had initially faded away immediately. He looked up at Yi Qingtang questioningly and then back at the pill. Hesitation filled his eyes. The source of the marrow pill had disappeared for a long time, and the last pill was obtained by the Blood Moon sect's sect master. However, it had been thousands of years from then. How was Yi Qingtang able to know the true appearance of the source of the marrow pill? The more the Blood Moon sect elder pondered, the more he found it strange. The pill was already in his palm, and whether to consume it or not was a question. After thinking over and over again, he ultimately decided to give it a try. After all, there was a blood pact between him and Yi Qingtang. If Yi Qingtang wanted to poison him, she would not benefit at all. The Blood Moon sect elder narrowed his eyes and made a decision. If this pill was real, then when he regained his powers, he would definitely make Yi Qingtang pay all the humiliation he suffered back. Instantly, the Blood Moon sect elder placed the source of the marrow pill in his mouth. The moment it was in his mouth, the blood smell spread throughout his mouth and into his throat as he swallowed. A warm sensation could be felt in his abdomen area subsequently. In just a moment, the Blood Moon Sect elder's eyes brightened. He could clearly feel that the deficiency in his spirit was slowly repairing, and the effect was much faster than absorbing the essence of sect disciples. As his spirit was slowly recovered, the Blood Moon Sect elder was increasingly delighted. Just as he was absorbed in the elation of recovering his powers, the effect of the source of the marrow pill suddenly frittered away, and the feeling of resurrection disappeared as well. The Blood Moon Sect elder sat there at a loss, though the fascination never left his eyes. "How is it? I didn't lie to you, did I?" Yi Qingtang looked at the Blood Moon Sect elder's behavior smilingly. She was still confident in her alchemy skills. After all, most of the pills and elixirs she used in her previous life were personally refined by her. The Blood Moon Sect elder's expression became complicated. He could clearly feel that his powers recovered slightly, but it was far from when he was at his peak. "You really refined this source of the marrow pill yourself?" The Blood Moon Sect elder felt the effects of the pill and fully believed that it was indeed the source of the marrow pill. However, he was completely unable to comprehend why Yi Qingtang, a girl only a little over 10 years old, would actually know the formula for the source of the marrow pill, which had disappeared for many years. "Of course," Yi Qingtang replied. The Blood Moon Sect elder's expression turned even more complicated. Although his powers did recover, it was not complete, and he could not kill Yi Qingtang instantly. If their strife set off the blood pact, he would die without a doubt. Furthermore, if Yi Qingtang really did refine the source of the marrow pill, wouldn't he lose the chance of recovering rapidly in the future if he killed her now? "It is not just the source of the marrow pill. I can also refine the bonded soul pill," Yi Qingtang suddenly said. The Blood Moon Sect elder's eyes almost popped out. Bonded soul pill. That was the divine bonded soul pill that could allow him to directly recover to his peak. "You really can refine it?" Excitement emerged in the Blood Moon Sect elder's eyes. Yi Qingtang nodded calmly. Without saying, the formula for the bonded soul pill was also obtained from that tomb. The Blood Moon Sect elder was agitated. Chapter 351. Carrot and Stick Approach. 3. If he really consumed the bonded soul pill, he could return to his peak. Instantly, the Blood Moon Sect elder no longer looked at Yi Qingtang with despise like before, and his eyes were instead twinkling with expectation. Just as the Blood Moon Sect elder's eyes were burning in excitement, Yi Qingtang poured cold water on him. "I can refine the bonded soul pill, but it requires the essence of the world, which is extremely difficult to obtain. I don't have it now." The Blood Moon Sect elder's full heart of expectation vanished instantly, and all energy was lost. Yet, on another thought, as long as Yi Qingtang knew the formula for the bonded soul pill, he still had a chance of returning to his peak as long as he found a way to gather the materials. No hurry, no hurry. We can slowly search and gather for the materials in the future," said the Blood Moon Sect elder pleasingly. Yi Qingtang watched the Blood Moon Sect elder's rare act of pleasing her, and a trace of laughter flashed across her eyes silently. "That's fine as well. If I don't have anything on in the future, I can make some source of the marrow pill for you to nourish yourself. The bonded soul pill can wait a while." The Blood Moon Sect elder nodded repeatedly, though he scoffed internally. He would go along with this girl right now, but once he obtained the bonded soul pill in the future, he would definitely destroy this girl. Yi Qingtang looked at the Blood Moon Sect elder silently, and the smile in her heart deepened. Although the Blood Moon Sect elder's skills decreased greatly, his experience and inside information of all aspects were way beyond those of ordinary people. Even though he was unable to be of help in her martial skills and cultivation, he would be a great help to her in other areas. If the Blood Moon Sect elder was not used properly, he would be a fatal sword, but if made use of well, he was a sharp blade that countered enemies. She was obviously aware of the Blood Moon Sect elder's hatred towards her, but, since she dared to make use of him, she had a certain level of confidence. "You must be careful in the inner sect from now on. Don't stir up any trouble," Yi Qingtang warned. She handed the Blood Moon Sect elder the source of the marrow pill because she was afraid he would start messing around in the inner sect. The inner sect was not comparable to the outer sect. If any inner sect disciples disappeared, the sect elders might personally investigate the case. Rest assured, I will take note of it. The Blood Moon sect elder was very easy to talk to this time. Anyway, with the source of the marrow pill, it was no longer that important to absorb the disciple's essence. Furthermore, he was still anticipating the bonded soul pill that Yi Qingtang would refine in the future, and obviously he had to give her face now. After warning the Blood Moon sect elder repeatedly, Yi Qingtang finally left his courtyard, and he actually walked her out himself in a rare good mood. It was just that these two people had their own thoughts, and it was still unknown who would gain the upper hand in the future. Yi Qingtang returned from the Blood Moon sect elders and had one less worry. However, she did not return to her residence immediately and walked in the opposite direction instead. The Blood Moon sect elders' side was considered to be settled, but Yi Qingtang's most important issue was her own skills. In another half a month, she could participate in sect missions, and the Xianming points in her hands were already depleted. She would still have to take on missions at that time, and only then would she be able to cultivate in the Spirit Consonance River more frequently to raise her skills in the shortest time possible. At that thought, Yi Qingtang's eyes fell on the demonic blood sword on her waist. An invincible sword capable of destroying anything was definitely a winning weapon in missions. Chapter 352, Sword Spirit Workshop, 1. The demonic blood sword itself was already powerful, but to Yi Qingtang, it was not enough. Yi Qingtang still had over 10 spirit crystals in her hands. Using a special method to embed the spirit crystals in a weapon could directly raise its combat effectiveness by an entire grade. When Yi Qingtang bought that batch of spirit crystals from Tonghua, she already had a plan in mind. However, her sword was too inferior that time, and there would not have been any huge combat power increases even if she were to embed spirit crystals in it. However, the demonic blood sword she had currently was different. As long as spirit crystals were embedded in it, Yi Qingtang was confident that she could make the demonic blood sword as powerful as those supposed divine weapons. After making up her mind, Yi Qingtang brought the demonic blood sword and headed towards the Sword Spirit Workshop. The Sword Spirit Workshop was a place to forge weapons in exchange for Xianming points and was, however, only open to inner sect disciples. If any disciples wanted to make a weapon, they could head to the Sword Spirit Workshop directly and request the blacksmiths to help them as long as they had enough Xianming points to pay. In her previous life, although Yi Qingtang did hear of the Sword Spirit Workshop, she had never been there herself. The fee for the Sword Spirit Workshop was not what she could afford previously. When Yi Qingtang was about to reach the Sword Spirit Workshop, she saw two disciples walking out from the workshop with rather ugly expressions. I told you not to go to the Sword Spirit Workshop, but you didn't believe me. Now that you've been met with a flat refusal, do you believe me now? A disciple said impolitely. The other disciple wailed. I only heard that the blacksmiths in the Sword Spirit Workshop have a huge temper but did not expect them to be so arrogant. Forging a dagger actually required tens of thousands of Xianming points? How can this be? Isn't this the same as snatching money? Quickly shut up. If those blacksmiths hear this, you will have a hard time in the future. Clearly, they are the ones who are arrogant. They're just a group of blacksmiths but behave more haughtily than the inner sect wardens. Why can't I talk about them? Why do you think they can be so haughty? Isn't it all because the Grand Elder is supporting them? If they reported what you said, do you still wish to stay in the inner sect? It's not like you don't know that our Grand Elder loves blacksmithing. The Sword Spirit Workshop is said to be for disciples to forge a weapon, but doesn't it serve the Grand Elder in reality? Otherwise, do you think that a blacksmith's position would be higher than a warden's? It is said that way, but no one has seen the Grand Elder in the Sword Spirit Workshop before. Do you think the Grand Elder is free on normal days? Why would he be in the Sword Spirit Workshop for nothing? The two disciples chatted for quite a while, and their expressions turned uglier. Yi Qingtang brushed past those two people, and her eyes narrowed when she heard their conversation. She had also heard some rumors regarding the Sword Spirit Workshop in her previous life. Although this place had high mastery in sword making, there were not many disciples who dared to go. Not because of anything else, but the very fact that the blacksmiths in the Sword Spirit Workshop were extremely haughty. The Sword Spirit Workshop was initially opened because of the interest of the previous sect master, who was also the current Grand Elder. The Grand Elder's position in the sect was way higher than the sect master's, and he was the highest skilled figure in all sections. He would not appear in the sect on usual days and only struck when the sect faced a crisis. He could be said to be extremely mysterious. Chapter 353, Sword Spirit Workshop 2. There had already been rumors in Xianling sect that the Grand Elder loved blacksmithing and that the Sword Spirit Workshop was catered to his interest. With the Grand Elder's protection, even the inner sect elders were relatively polite to the blacksmiths there, much less ordinary disciples. Perhaps, those two disciples complained a bit because they suffered in the Sword Spirit Workshop, but one could still hear the fear in their words. Yi Qingtang was not too concerned though. She was there to strengthen the demonic blood sword and could not be bothered about anything else. In just a while, Yi Qingtang reached the entrance of the Sword Spirit Workshop. Although the Sword Spirit Workshop was opened to forge weapons, the place was relatively magnificent. Before Yi Qingtang entered the workshop, she was already able to feel the gradual increase in the surrounding temperature. When Yi Qingtang entered the workshop, she saw a few blacksmiths making weapons. As the hammers landed, a clank sounded, and sparks flew everywhere. Surrounded by furnaces, the temperature of the Sword Spirit Workshop was frighteningly high. All types of weapons were hung on the walls of the Sword Spirit Workshop, and from the sharp blades, it was evident that they were of relatively fine quality. Although they were a group of arrogant blacksmiths, their standards were way above those of the blacksmiths outside the sect. Yi Qingtang's arrival did not draw any attention from the blacksmiths, who even could not be bothered to look up and only focused on the work on hand. An in-charge sitting aside was smoking an opium pipe every now and then. Lifting an eyelid lazily, he swept an indifferent look across Yi Qingtang, who entered the workshop. "In charge, I wish to forget a sword. How do I go about doing this?" Yi Qingtang walked forward and said politely. The in-charge glanced at Yi Qingtang and took 2 puffs before answering casually. "What kind of sword do you wish to forge?" Yi Qingtang removed the demonic blood sword hung on her waist. The warden took a look and nodded slightly, though he still had an emotionless expression on his face. 30,000 Xianming points. Yi Qingtang was dumbfounded instantly. 30,000 Xianming points? Was this a joke? With another 10,000, it was enough to exchange for the demonic blood sword. The in-charge saw Yi Qingtang's expression and said, "I quoted this price because your sword is pretty good. If it were some ordinary plaything, no one would help you to forge even if you paid double the price." Yi Qingtang could tell that the blacksmiths here were not easy to deal with. A casual quote was already tens of thousands of Xianming points, and whether they forged it was another matter altogether. It was all dependent on whether the weapon could catch the attention of the blacksmiths. Yi Qingtang wanted to strengthen the demonic blood sword, but 30,000 Xianming points was definitely not a price she could afford to pay. She was not a fool. They really were working under the Grand Elder. Look at how different their tone was. Yi Qingtang had a little headache. Not mentioning how she did not have so many Xianming points, but even if she did, she would definitely not be willing to spend so lavishly like that. However, she was not resigned to leaving her weapon as it was. Then, Yi Qingtang scanned her surrounding and finally spoke after some hesitation. "I don't have 30,000 Xianming points. I'm afraid I can't request the masters to personally work on it. I wonder if I can forge it myself?" The in-charge scanned Yi Qingtang and could not help but chuckle after noticing her thin wrists and legs. Knocking on his opium pipe, he leaned back on his chair lazily and asked, "You wish to forge it yourself?" Chapter 354 Sword Spirit Workshop 3. Yi Qingtang nodded. "That's fine, but you will have to pay 1,000 Xianming points regardless of whether it will be successful or not," said the in-charge casually, as it was not the first time seeing disciples who wanted to smith a weapon themselves. After all, the fees for the Sword Spirit Workshop was exorbitant and not what ordinary disciples could afford. However, those disciples who requested to forge a weapon themselves usually failed horribly. It was no wonder though. How would these young masters and ladies who usually prioritized cultivation have come into contact with forging? Forging was not something that could be successful just by randomly picking a metal and hammering it. Forging was a profound craft which required immense knowledge on various techniques, such as the temperature, duration to smelt, timing to hammer, amount of force to exert, and distributing the weight. How would a layman understand this? If one did not understand the techniques of forging, they would not be able to forge an ordinary dagger, much less a divine weapon. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. The in-charge presumed that Yi Qingtang was same as those disciples and was too lazy to say anything else. 1,000 Xianming points were not considered small, but this was way better than the exorbitant 30,000 Xianming points, and thus, Yi Qingtang swiftly handed 1,000 Xianming points. After receiving the Xianming points, the in-charge stood up leisurely and led Yi Qingtang around a forging room, ultimately bringing her to a plain-looking corner. An old anvil was placed there along with an extinguished, cold furnace beside it. You will forge your weapon here. There are some materials around here. Take whatever you want to use. It'll give you 6 hours, and afterward, you must leave no matter whether you're done forging, said the in-charge. Okay. Yi Qingtang scanned the conditions of the place without saying anything. She had no options anyway. Knowing the rules of the Sword Spirit Workshop, she naturally did not speak much. If the other party was unhappy and chased her out, there was no room for her to resist. Who dared to be unruly on the Grand Elder's turf? The in-charge saw that Yi Qingtang knew how to behave and left casually without saying anything. Yi Qingtang did not dare to waste any time with only 6 hours on hand. Rolling up her sleeves immediately, she lit the furnace, prepared some water, and wiped the anvil and tools clean. The in-charge just left, but a blacksmith hurried over and whispered something in his ears. There was a change in the in-charge's expression. Yi Qingtang was about done with her preparation. She placed the demonic blood sword on the anvil and looked at it repeatedly. She spent much effort to obtain this demonic blood sword, and if she accidentally damaged it from the forging, she would not be able to bear it. Little girl, are you intending to forge this sword? Suddenly, a rather old voice traveled from behind Yi Qingtang. Turning around, Yi Qingtang saw a plainly clothed elderly with a gray beard standing behind her with his hands behind him as he looked at the demonic blood sword on the anvil. Yes. Yi Qingtang smiled, thinking that he was a blacksmith in the Sword Spirit Workshop. This sword is all right. However, you must be careful when forging it. The material of this sword becomes very brittle when in contact with fire. The elderly frowned slightly. Looking at the young and innocent lady, he felt that the sword before her was most likely going to be ruined. I will be careful. Yi Qingtang replied courteously. As the elderly was frowning, she directly placed the blade of the demonic blood sword in the fire. The scarlet flame engulfed the blade instantly, and the sword's glint was covered by the flame. The elderly's brows twitched slightly. This is called careful? You threw it in without the slightest hesitation. Chapter 355, Blinding Forging Skills. 1. Witnessing Yi Qingtang's reckless act, the elderly shook his head in disappointment and walked aside. When the other blacksmiths saw the elderly, they clearly had reverent expressions in their eyes but did not reveal it on their faces as they continued to focus on their work on hand. Yi Qingtang watched the demonic blood sword burn red and focused all her attention on it. Once a yellow glimmer emerged in the sea of red, she immediately removed the demonic blood sword and placed it on the anvil. Grasping the correct timing, she immediately gripped the few spirit crystals that she had prepared earlier and embedded them into the burning red demonic blood sword. Those spirit crystals were carefully selected by her as the spirit energy in them completely aligned with the properties of the demonic blood sword. The elderly from not far away cast a cold look and frowned immediately. After he identified that the materials that Yi Qingtang was embedding into the sword were spirit crystals, his frown could not help but deepen. Ridiculous spirit crystals were of little value, and the sword she had was considered pretty good. Yet, this girl had no idea of the gravity and casually embedded something in it, which would probably ruin the air of that sword. What a waste of that good sword, the elderly shook his head. At that instant, the in charge of the sword spirit workshop noticed the elderly's presence and hurried over. He frantically bowed in respect but was stopped by the elderly, who lifted a hand slightly. The in charge heaved a sigh of relief secretly. Following the elderly's eyes, he spotted Yi Qingtang and could not help but frown after noticing what she was doing. Wouldn't embedding spirit crystals into a sword damage the sword itself? This disciple is too reckless, said the in charge. That girl appears to be pretty young. She is going to ruin a good sword. Go tell her to stop, uttered the elderly with a frown. The in charge nodded slightly and walked towards Yi Qingtang. However, Yi Qingtang happened to have finished embedding, and she threw the scarlet sword into the water to cold. Sizzles could be heard instantly. Mist gently filled the air. The elderly shook his head silently at that sight. The sword was done forging, and it was already too late to stop her. There was no way of saving it now. The in charge was rather speechless as well. But when Yi Qingtang took the demonic blood sword out of the water, there was actually a red glimmer that wrapped around the sword body. What's going on? The elderly was slightly taken aback, and the expression in his eyes changed when he saw the floating red glimmer on the blade. If that sword was only considered not bad before, then now, it could completely be worthy of the divine weapon title. The in charge was stunned as well. He had never seen such a situation after years of forging. Their gazes were frozen instantly, but Yi Qingtang did not realize their stares at all. As she looked at the completely new demonic blood sword, a smile broke out on her tiny, sweat-beaded face. Success. She did not have a spirit root in her previous life and had difficulties in improving her cultivation. Thus, she spent a lot of effort and energy on other aspects. Regardless of whether it was refining pills or forging items, as long as it could increase her combat power, she would invest a lot of energy to learn and practice them. She spent near 100 years on forging in her previous life. Not mentioning about anything else, just based on her current forging skills, she was already better than quite a number of renowned blacksmiths. 30,000 Xianming points? If not for the fact that she did not have a place to forge her weapon, she could not even be bothered to pay that 1,000 Xianming points. Chapter 356, Blinding Forging Skills. 2. However, Yi Qingtang could not be bothered with these. Everything she did was merely to allow her to have even more chips to confront Yi. Seeing that the forging of the demonic blood sword was completed, Yi Qingtang estimated that there was still some time left. Then, her eyes landed on a pile of meteoric iron laid aside. Since she had already spent 1,000 Xianming points, why not make use of this time to forge some other things? Then, Yi Qingtang bent down to select suitable materials. The expressions of the elderly and in charge, who were standing not far away, had long turned a little weird. The in charge was about to walk up to her but was stopped by the elderly. Looking at her, it seems that she still wants to continue. Let's watch first, said the elderly in a composed manner. Stunned, the in charge nodded and retreated to a side, although there was a look of surprise in his eyes. The elderly's eyes were fully fixed on Yi Qingtang, who chose a black slab of iron from the pile of materials. His eyes twinkled. Is that the black gold meteorite iron? The elderly looked at the in charge beside him. The in charge was dumbfounded slightly and only confirmed it after taking a closer look. Yes, that is the black gold meteorite iron. It was left from forging a glove previously. I'm afraid other blacksmiths did not notice and ended placing it in the ordinary materials. The warden could not help but feel a pinch in his heart. The grade of that black gold meteorite iron was extremely superior. It was just that it looked basically the same as black iron, and one would not even be able to tell the difference if he or she was not an expert. Although they looked the same, there was a world of difference in their prices. The price of a slab of black gold meteorite iron could buy hundreds of thousands of tons of black iron, and even the Sword Spirit Workshop only had a few slabs of it. Usually, such precious materials would be kept well, but someone did not notice and took it as ordinary black iron, placing it in the pile of materials. Although it was just the size of a palm, it was already worth a fortune. I'll let her know. The in charge looked at the elderly rather apologetically. That black gold meteorite iron was probably over tens of thousands of Shenming points. Forget it. Since you let her select the materials herself, how can there be a reason to ask for the item back? The elderly waved a hand as curiosity emerged in his eyes. It was just unknown whether this little girl identified the black gold meteorite iron correctly or treated it as black iron. The in-charge retreated to a side and could not help but feel vexed. The black gold meteorite iron was extremely previous. Although Yi Qingtang did surprise them with her embedding previously, embedding was not forging. Truly forging a weapon from raw material was way more complicated than embedding. If such a wonderful black gold meteorite iron was ruined by this girl, wouldn't it be a pity? Help us. The elderly had already laid his words, and no matter how unwilling the in-charge was, he could only bear with it at that moment. The in-charge was gloomy, but on the other hand, Yi Qingtang was exceptionally delighted. She did not expect to find such an amazing treasure like the black gold meteorite iron in the pile of materials. Although it was indeed small, it should be enough to forge a dagger after heating it. Picking up such a huge bargain for nothing, Yi Qingtang's heart no longer ached over the 1,000 Shenming points spent. 1,000 Shenming points in exchange for a slab of black gold meteorite iron. Was there even a better deal on Earth? Delightedly, Yi Qingtang directly placed the black gold meteorite iron into the furnace to heat it and turned around to pick up a few spirit crystals. Chapter 357, Blinding Forging Skills. 3. The in-charge and the elderly thought Yi Qingtang was going to embed spirit crystals into the new weapon again and were instantly on alert. They found the effect of embedding the spirit crystals into the demonic blood sword fascinating and were going to look carefully this time. However, Yi Qingtang suddenly took out a thick cloth and wrapped the spirit crystals. Afterward, she picked up the hammer on the anvil and pounded on the bag of spirit crystals heavily. A sharp, crisp sound pierced the ears of the in-charge and the elderly. What is she doing? The elderly watched in astonishment as Yi Qingtang continuously smashed the spirit crystals into pieces with a hammer. Could it be that the spirit crystals are too huge? The black gold meteorite iron she chose just now is not able to embed many spirit crystals, but crushing them and selecting a few small ones is possible, said the in-charge seriously while casting his belittlement away. As the two were caught in curiosity, Yi Qingtang had already hammered numerous times, and the entire bag was pounded relatively flat. Seeing that it was about done, she finally unwrapped the bag. The spirit crystals that were initially about the size of a fingernail were already crushed into tiny pieces which twinkled brightly under the glow of the fire. The elderly looked at the spirit crystals that were almost in powder form and cast a look at the in-charge who was speaking seriously. There was a slightly awkward expression on the in-charge's face. It was already crushed to this state. How could it be used to embed a weapon? I was ignorant. I really cannot tell what this disciple wants to do, the in-charge said rather embarrassedly. The elderly did not say anything much. His curiosity was piqued by every action Yi Qingtang took. She was clearly forging a weapon, and the processes were similar, but he was still unsure exactly what Yi Qingtang wanted to do. The black gold meteorite iron that was thrown into the fire was already burned red, and its edges already softened under the high temperature. Why is she still not removing it? If she still doesn't remove it, the black gold meteorite iron is really going to turn into molten iron. The elderly furrowed his brows slightly. The liquid molten iron could be poured into a mold to fix the shape. Although it could be formed into the shape of a weapon directly, it was missing countless hammerings. Without repeated hammering, the ductility of the black gold meteorite iron would be greatly reduced. This girl is quite young. I reckon she does not have enough arm strength. It doesn't seem possible for her to hammer a complete piece of black gold meteorite iron into shape, the in-charge said as a matter of fact. Apart from the forging techniques, blacksmiths were more particular about their arm strength. After all, the iron hammers they used were as heavy as 100 jin. To slowly hammer a slab of metal into shape, the minimum number of hammerings required would already reach tens of thousands of strokes, and each stroke had to be fully supported with the arm strength. While this little girl may have some skills, arm strength was not something that could be trained in a day. The elderly thought that he had a point as well but did not say anything and continued observing. Yi Qingtang watched the red iron turn into molten iron, and her lips curled into a smile. Swiftly holding onto the bag of spirit crystal powder, she poured them into the molten iron in the high temperature. As the glistening powders were poured into the molten iron, the blazing red flames engulfed them in an instant. The eyes of the elderly and in charge almost popped out at the sight. She actually mixed the spirit crystal powder into the black gold meteorite iron. What was this move? Chapter 358, Blinding Forging Skills. 4. The in-charge was utterly dumbfounded. He had been forging items for many years and was also a rather famous blacksmith who had produced quite a number of divine weapons. But, Wuxia world. Sight, he had never seen someone forging like that. Seeing that it was about done, Yi Qingtang removed the molten iron and allowed it to cool. Before the black gold meteorite iron was fully cooled, it could still be shaped. Yi Qingtang immediately hammered the deformed slab of black gold meteorite iron. Sparks flew with every hammer. Yi Qingtang hammered at an extremely fast speed and with enough force. In just a moment, she had already hammered 100 times. Even the elderly and the in-charge, who secretly observed her, were amazed by the accuracy and strength of her hammering. Putting everything aside, her hammering skills alone had already exceeded their expectations. Her skills were probably better than most of the blacksmiths in the Sword Spirit Workshop. What is this girl's background? Looking at how steady her hammering is, it seems like the skills of someone who has been forging armaments for decades. The more the elderly watched, the more surprised he was. The little girl before him clearly looked only around 10 or so years old, and even if she had been making weapons since young, her techniques should not be this polished. She has already hammered about 1,000 times. Why is she still not preparing to shape the black gold meteorite iron? The in-charge was at a loss as well. He watched Yi Qingtang hammer the metal for some time, and although her actions were sharp and nimble, that slab of black gold meteorite iron was nowhere near being stretched into a weapon and was still a dark, black block of metal. Yi Qingtang did not notice the peeping eyes behind her and was only focused on the black gold meteorite iron before her. She originally wanted to find a material that was not so bad in quality and forge a small weapon with it. However, she did not expect to actually find such a treasure. Would it not be a waste if she did not make use of it well? Since she got a bargain, of course she had to make the best out of it. After hammering for 1,000 times, Yi Qingtang threw the black gold meteorite iron into the furnace once again. Wiping the sweat off her forehead, she took out some spirit crystals again and crushed it using the method she did previously. The elderly and in-charge were dumbfounded. Yi Qingtang repeatedly heated the black gold meteorite iron into molten iron, added spirit crystal powder, and hammered it patiently. That was just like, she wanted to fully combine the spirit crystal powder with the black gold meteorite iron. Oh my lord! This girl is rather strange. The in-charge hit his forehead and was increasingly alarmed the more he watched. Wuxia world. Sight, he, as well, knew about combining other items. However, the quality of most combined items was close to the base material itself, as it was not too difficult to combine two different items if they had similar qualities. However, the black gold meteorite iron and spirit crystals had two completely different qualities, and to completely combine them was simply unimaginable. To combine it well, the number of times to hammer would be multiplied a few times, and it was definitely not a small job. Furthermore, whether they could be perfectly combined was not certain. Thus, normal blacksmiths never dared to take such a risk. If the materials were unable to combine completely, the black gold meteorite iron was going to be completely wasted. Yi Qingtang felt that it was about done after repeatedly adding spirit crystals 3 times. After combining it the final time, Yi Qingtang started to stretch the entire block of black gold meteorite iron, which was slowly forged into the shape of a dagger. Chapter 359, Master of Forging 1. As the clanging sounds spread within the Sword Spirit Workshop, the elderly and in-charge's gaze started to burn. At that moment, the two people, like kids with a strong thirst for knowledge, had their eyes fixed on Yi Qingtang, who gradually forged that block of black gold meteorite iron into an extremely sharp dagger. Time ticked away. Absorbed in forging, Yi Qingtang seemed to have lost track of time. She placed the newly made dagger into the cold water to cool it for the final time, and when she took it out, its black blade shone with subtle brilliance. It seemed as though a dark sky full of stars had transformed into this dagger, which was about the length of a forearm. It's pretty good looking. Yi Qingtang grinned at the dagger made by combining spirit crystal powder. With the pure black gold meteorite iron as the base and crystal powder shining through it, its appearance was extremely beautiful. After all the processes were done, Yi Qingtang finally heaved in relief. She placed the demonic blood sword and the dagger before her separately. The strengthening of the demonic blood sword went without saying, but the dagger was an unexpected surprise. Exchanging so many babies with 1,000 Shenming points was really a huge profit. After admiring them for a while, she kept the two weapons and was prepared to leave. However, only when she turned around did she realize that the in-charge of the Sword Spirit Workshop and that elderly had been standing a distance away behind her from some time ago, and their eyes were on her. It seemed that they had been watching for quite some time. Yi Qingtang was slightly alarmed. The forging technique she used previously had not appeared up to date. The method of embedding spirit crystals into weapons was only circulated by a blacksmith master months later, while the technique of combining crushed spirit crystals into materials was discovered only 100 years later. According to the current knowledge of forging techniques, whatever she did was simply incomprehensible. But thinking from another perspective, it was not a big deal to use a method that no one knew of. At that thought, Yi Qingtang finally sighed in relief. She looked up to check the time and realized, unknowingly, she had spent nearly 10 hours in the Sword Spirit Workshop, which exceeded the 6 hours that the in-charge had set initially by quite a bit. The in-charge had an arrogant attitude, and it might have been a misconduct to exceed her time limit by 4 hours. However, there were not many Shenming points in her hands, and if the in-charge ordered her to make up for the extra time she spent, she did not have any remaining Shenming points to do so. I apologize for not noticing the time, Yi Qingtang said rather awkwardly to the in-charge. The in-charge suddenly returned to his senses and scanned Yi Qingtang with a weird expression. However, he did not dare to show his emotions with the elderly beside him and only feigned composure. It's fine. The Sword Spirit Workshop is not an apathetic place. So be it if you exceeded the time. The in-charge spoke generously, but he completely did not mind Yi Qingtang using 4 additional hours. If possible, he wished Yi Qingtang would forge a few more weapons for him to watch to his heart's content. Yi Qingtang was at a loss. The Sword Spirit Workshop was not an apathetic place. It was her first time hearing it in both her current and previous lives. If this were circulated, the Xianling sect disciples' chins would probably drop in shock. Who was not aware that the Sword Spirit Workshop had the most rules? Yi Qingtang could not understand why the in-charge suddenly changed his attitude. Since she was not required to supplement additional Xianming points, she was obviously happy to be saved from additional trouble. Chapter 360, Master of Forging 2. The in-charge saw that Yi Qingtang seemed to be leaving and immediately looked at the elderly beside him. The elderly man had a complicated expression. After remaining silent for some time, he suddenly walked up and asked, "Can I take a look at the 2 weapons you forged just now?" Yi Qingtang exceeded her allotted time and was not in a position to reject his plea. Thus, she took both the dagger and the demonic blood sword out. The in-charge walked forward and held the weapons cautiously with a stunned expression in his eyes. Placing the 2 weapons before the elderly man, the 2 people looked on agitatedly as though they were looking at precious treasures. Wuxia world. Sight staring at the weapons, the elderly man gently brushed his old hand against the 2 weapons. The demonic blood sword emitted a cold air while some remaining warmth still remained in the dagger. Look, the air of the demonic blood sword and the spirit crystals in it are combined perfectly. There's actually no damage to the sword at all, and its aura is strengthened instead. The elderly man looked at the demonic blood sword with infatuation. The in-charge nodded repeatedly. Yes, indeed. I've never seen such a technique before. Look at this dagger. The elderly man held the dagger and drew a few strokes in the air, and a sound akin to a dragon's roar passed by their ears as the dagger glistened. The elderly's eyes brightened suddenly. Good. The eyes of the in-charge were narrowed in enchantment. Standing from aside, Yi Qingtang watched the two old men who were overflowing with energy like kids, and the corners of her lips twitched a little. This in-charge was like a completely different person. However, Yi Qingtang could not say anything as well. After all, she picked up a block of black gold meteorite iron here, and if she fussed about it with the in-charge, she would probably not be able to bring the dagger back with her. It was good that only admiration filled the eyes of the in-charge and elderly, and they did not seem to make things difficult for her. After looking at the weapons for quite some time, they finally returned them rather unwillingly to Yi Qingtang. Little girl, what's your name? The elderly could not help but ask after returning the weapons to Yi Qingtang. However, this question shocked the in-charge, who also looked at Yi Qingtang differently. Yi Qingtang did not think much and replied, I am Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang. The elderly ran a hand through his beard as he took a glance at Yi Qingtang with narrowed eyes. Initially, I couldn't tell that you actually know so many forging techniques at such a young age. Since you like it, you can visit the Sword Spirit Workshop more frequently in the future. Don't waste your talent in forging armaments. Wuxia World. Sight Yi Qingtang nodded but was clearly aware that she did not have many extra Xianming points to spend here. The two weapons were enough for her right now, and unless her skills increased by a great extent, she probably would not visit the Sword Spirit Workshop within a short period of time. The elderly and in-charge did not say anything else, and Yi Qingtang left after bidding her goodbyes. Once Yi Qingtang left, the elderly finally laughed. This girl has some talent in forging. If she comes again in the future, just let her forge. Yes, replied the in-charge respectfully. Admiration emerged in his eyes as well. I have never expected there to be someone with such a talent in forging in the inner sect. Her techniques are relatively skilled, and I've never seen her method of using spirit crystals to forge weapons. From what you saw, what do you think of her forging abilities? The elderly asked. After a moment of hesitation, the in-charge finally spoke. Perhaps almost on par with mine. The elderly man was slightly shocked at his words. The in-charge of the Sword Spirit Workshop appeared rather casual, but if his name was revealed, everyone in the world probably knew about him. You're saying that her forging abilities can be said to be of a master's standards. Chapter 361, Master of Forging 3. The in-charge forced a smile. She only forged one finished weapon today, but the skills she displayed are no worse than mine. I wonder who her master is. Perhaps only a grandmaster is able to teach such a genius. The elderly's eyes deepened at the words. Everyone thinks that the level of one's martial skills will enable them to attain a different status. However, regardless of forging or refining pills, one would not have any other concerns if they reached the level of a grandmaster, as powerful figures would offer their services to obtain the items they produced. I wonder how Yi Qingtang's cultivation is currently. If there's nothing outstanding, she could focus on forging armaments. With her talent, it is not impossible to reach the level of a grandmaster, the in-charge mumbled. In this world, it was extremely rare for people to reach the state of a grandmaster, and only a few were successful in the past 1,000 years. And those few people had average cultivations, but any random divine weapons they produced could attract a group of people offering their services. No matter how powerful the mighty figures were, they would still seek an exceedingly strong weapon, and thus, grandmasters were people who they had to treat politely the most. It seems that I need to make a trip to the inner sect's elders' hall. The elderly rubbed his beard as he thought. If Yi Qingtang really had the ability to become a grand master of forging, she would no longer be as simple as an ordinary disciple to Xianling sect. If Xianling sect could raise a grand master, it would have an exceptional significance. At that thought, the elderly did not stay any longer in the Sword Spirit Workshop and left immediately. Yi Qingtang, who exited the Sword Spirit Workshop, did not realize how lucky she was today as she joyously hugged her demonic blood sword and dagger all the way back to her residence. In the yard, Fei Ying was cleaning up the fallen leaves and immediately greeted Yi Qingtang when he saw her. "Are you in a very good mood today, miss?" Fei Ying blinked at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang chuckled and nodded. Suddenly recalling something, she opened her space ring and took some items out. "Tell Enai Shang to come here." Fei Ying nodded and immediately called for Enai Shang. When Yi Qingtang saw the two young teens standing before her, she finally placed the items that she just took out into their hands. "No matter what your identities are currently, according to your talents, you will not remain here forever as long as you cultivate diligently from now on." Yi Qingtang handed Fei Ying and Enai Shang two basic cultivation techniques which, although were not considered rare, were the most suitable for their age. Only by laying a strong foundation from young would there be better effects in one's cultivation in the future. Apart from cultivation techniques, Yi Qingtang also handed them a few bottles of She Spirit pills. These were all exchanged when she was in the outer sect. Now that she had the soul condensation pills after entering the inner sect, the She Spirit pills were naturally no longer suitable for her. Disbelief filled the eyes of the two kids as they looked at the pile of items in their hands. The identity of a sword boy or attendant girl was equivalent to that of servants in the inner sect. To guard against their sword boy and attendant girl from developing, many disciples never allowed them to have too much contact with things related to martial skills, much less take the initiative to give them cultivation techniques and elixirs. "Miss, we cannot accept these items." Enai Shang frantically shook her head and returned the items to Yi Qingtang. Fei Ying, similarly, was overwhelmed by this unexpected favor and was a little frightened. Chapter 362, Mission 1. Yi Qingtang would never treat the people around her poorly. After entering the inner sect in her previous life, the sword boy and attendant girl appointed to her treated her pretty well, and that was a slight portion of warmth she received in the sect. However, those two kids were probably not yet 10 right now and had not been selected by the sect. She was not powerful enough in her previous life and could not do anything for them. Meeting Fei Ying and Enai Shang this time was considered a kind of fate. In her previous life, Fei Ying was able to become an official inner sect disciple through his own talent, and what she did merely won her a favor. Rather, it was Enai Shang. She had never heard anything about Enai Shang in her previous life, but she could tell that Enai Shang's talent was not any lower than Fei Ying's from these few days. Yet somehow, she did not manage to become an official disciple in her previous life. The two kids still wanted to reject the gifts but were forced to accept them by Yi Qingtang. With a pile of items in their hands, Fei Ying and Enai Shang were both surprised and delighted. They thanked her continuously and engraved this precious favor of hers in their hearts. It was really their blessing to be able to meet such a nice person like Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang waved a hand for them to continue with their work. There was not much work in the courtyard on usual days, and the two kids were idle most of the time. As a sword boy, Fei Ying could exchange a few moves with Yi Qingtang. However, Yi Qingtang's method of cultivation was not similar to that of normal people. Thus, she rarely allowed Fei Ying to practice with her. Rather than letting the two of them waste their time, allowing them to cultivate and improve their skills in their spare time was much better. With a weapon she adored, Yi Qingtang would naturally not neglect her cultivation. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Apart from giving the two kids some guidance in their cultivation, most of her time was spent on upgrading herself. The spirit energy in the inner sect was much richer than the outer sect, and this was more nourishing for Yi Qingtang's spirit root. After entering the inner sect for a month, new disciples were required to begin accepting sect missions. However, before that, Yi Qingtang had already accepted 2 rewarded missions by herself and earned quite a lot of Xianming points, which she used to cultivate in the Spirit Consonance River. It was a coincidence that her first sect-appointed mission was actually together with the Blood Moon Sect Elder. When the Blood Moon Sect Elder saw Yi Qingtang, there was a subtle change in his expression, and it was not as resistant as before. Some outer sect disciples have not returned from their sect mission within the stipulated timing. The sect wants me to take a look. Yi Qingtang looked at the mission scroll, and when she thought of the word disappearance, her eyes fell on the Blood Moon Sect Elder. The mass disappearance of disciples from different sects was mostly related to the Blood Moon sect's resurrection. However, the disappearance situation stopped afterward. Now that there was another disappearance case 2 months later, Yi Qingtang could not help but suspect whether it was related to the Blood Moon sect. The Blood Moon sect elder was rather annoyed by Yi Qingtang's stare. "Don't look at me. I've always been in Xianling sect during this period of time, and even if a disciple did disappear, it has nothing to do with me. Even if he wanted to, there was no opportunity." Moreover, with Yi Qingtang's threat and temptation using the source of the marrow pill and bonded soul pill, how would he act recklessly under her watch? "I know it's not you. I'm just asking if you have any clues," Yi Qingtang said. The Blood Moon sect elder replied. "How would I have any clues? Everyone from the Blood Moon sect had their souls sealed back then, and most of them were scattered everywhere. How would I be able to know anything?" Yi Qingtang was troubled over the matter as well and was more vigilant. If this incident was really related to the Blood Moon sect, there was nothing bad about the Blood Moon sect elder following along. Chapter 363, Mission 2. This time, Yi Qingtang's mission location was at the Floating Light Canyon, which was some distance away from Xianling sect. Traveling to and fro would take at least 1 month. After making some preparations, the two of them set off immediately. In the Floating Light Canyon, a few figures shuffled through the dense forest in a panic. They were dressed in the Xianling sect's outer sect uniform, but at that instant, these sect disciples no longer had the arrogance and distinguished air around them as before, with dirt and wounds covering their bodies. The Wind Sword sect people probably would not be able to catch up so quickly. "Let's take a rest for now," a Xianling sect disciple panted. The dirt on his face could not cover his pale complexion. The other people slowly stopped after hearing that, and they panted with an ugly expression. The 7 people were all Xianling sect's outer sect disciples and had received a sect mission a month before. After heading to the Floating Light Canyon, the entire mission was completed relatively successfully. However, no one had expected that they would actually encounter an accident when they were about to return. A pale Su Wan was in the team as well. She pursed her lips lightly and looked towards Lu Xiuwen, who was frowning and breathing unsteadily. "Senior brother Lu, will the people from the Wind Sword sect still chase after us?" Lu Ziyuan's expression was very ugly at that moment. This was the first sect mission he accepted after recovering from the injury, yet unexpectedly he was met with such a setback. Then, Lu Xiuwen did not reply to Su Wan and rather looked at another disciple in the team. That disciple was tall and handsome, but his expression was extremely ugly at that instant with wounds all over his body. It could be said that his injuries were the most severe amongst the 7 of them. "Xiao Mo, this incident started because of you. With things as such, shouldn't you give us an explanation?" Lu Xiuwen threw his words coldly. His voice attracted the attention of other people in the team. The reason for having to go in hiding in the Floating Light Canyon so miserably was something done by that disciple called Xiao, Junior Brother Lu. This was just an accident. Junior Brother Qiao did not wish for this either. "Don't say any more already. What is most important right now is to flee from this place," a disciple mediated. Lu Xiuwen scoffed as he looked at the pale Xiao Mo. "Accident? If he did not offend the Wind Sword sect disciples for nothing, why would they attack us? Furthermore, it was originally their own business, but he did not know what was good for him and had to join in. Now that he stirred up such a huge matter, why do we have to suffer together with him?" Lu Ziyuan's words were relatively harsh, and Xiao Mo's expression turned even uglier. The Wind Sword sect and they usually stayed out of each other's way. Nothing happened initially when they met, but Xiao Mo happened to see his fiancée in the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. As the two groups passed by each other, he caught sight of the young lady joking with a Wind Sword sect disciple flirtatiously, which infuriated him immediately. He reasoned with them, but both parties were angered as they argued and ended up in a physical brawl. The number of Wind Sword sect disciples was double of theirs, and when they fought, the 7 people from Xianling sect naturally were not the Wind Sword sect's opponents. In the end, the Xianling sect disciples were still unable to escape after being cornered in the Floating Light Canyon by the Wind Sword sect disciples for days. Chapter 364, Mission 3. You don't have the skills, but you still stirred up these troubles. Xiao Mo, if you are a man, you should answer for your own acts and admit your mistakes to the Wind Sword sect people. Don't implicate us. Lu Ziyuan's brows were tightly furrowed as displeasure filled him. Xiao Mo hung his head low. He was the most severely injured and was extremely vexed over implicating his fellow senior and junior brothers. After being incited by Lu Xiuan, Xiao Mo straightened himself with difficulty and said, "Junior brother Lu is right. I should answer for my own acts. I'll look for the Wind Sword sect people right now." Seeing that Xiao Mo was about to leave while struggling with all the injuries, the other disciples stopped him immediately. "What do you mean answering for your own acts? We are all Xianling sect disciples and are senior and junior brothers." Deep down, everyone was aware that although the conflict was started because of Xiao Mo, the sect's prestige was at stake right now. If Xiao Mo were to be handed over, what would become of them? Pieces of trash that betrayed a fellow disciple to ensure their own safety? Lu Ziyuan's expression turned colder. He did not intend to waste any time here. An outer sect elder recently thought highly of him, and he learned quite a number of cultivation techniques, which improved his skills greatly. This delay would waste so much time that could have been used to upgrade himself. Senior brother Lu's words have some reason in them. The number of us is fewer than that of the Wind Sword sect. If they don't retreat, God knows how long we will be surrounded here for. It is already past the mission submission deadline. If we return any later, I'm afraid we would all be punished. Su Wan echoed after Lu Xiuan. Over this period of time, Su Wan witnessed Lu Ziyuan's improvement, and she was naturally more hopeful. Given Lu Ziyuan's improvements, it seemed that he probably had a chance of becoming an inner sect disciple in the inner sect assessment next year. As the group was arguing, a few figures suddenly appeared. "I was still wondering where you all hid. So it is here." A tall young man who was donned in the Wind Sword sect's outer sect uniform walked with large strides towards the group with over 10 Wind Sword sect disciples following behind him. The appearance of the Wind Sword sect disciples caused the Xianling sect disciples to be on full alert. "What do you all want to do?" A Xianling sect disciple asked in a low tone. "What do we want to do?" The leader of the Wind Sword sect disciples scoffed. He scanned the faces of the people from Xianling sect, and his eyes eventually fell on Xiao Mo. "You Xianling sect disciples do not have any manners and are actually asking me what I want to do now?" He offended a disciple of my sect. "Has Xianling sect never taught you how to settle this matter?" Xiao Mo's expression was a little ugly. He looked at the blustering and truculent Wind Sword sect people and then looked back at the miserable appearance of his fellow disciples. He clenched his fist silently and took a step forward. "I was the perpetrator. If you have anything, just come at me." The Wind Sword sect disciple raised a brow at Xiao Mo and cackled instantly. "You have some sense of responsibility. My requirements are not high." His eyes sharpened. Suddenly, he lifted the hem of his clothing and stepped on a stump with his left foot. Tapping his thigh, he laughed with an ill intention. "As long as you crawl between my legs and admit your mistake with 3 kowtows, this matter can be considered to be over. I'll bring my people away immediately and allow you all to leave the floating light canyon." The expressions of all Xianling sect disciples were extremely ugly upon hearing the Wind Sword sect disciple. "Scoundrel! You're going too far." Chapter 365. Mission 4. Go too far? The Wind Sword sect disciple scoffed. The moment he finished his sentence, the group of Wind Sword sect disciples people immediately drew out their swords, which gleamed threateningly. Is it just an apology from him or all of you seeking death together? The choice is all up to you. Do you think we are really afraid of you? Let's fight if that's what you want. A Xianling sect disciple took it upon himself to draw out his sword in preparation for a fight. Other disciples, similarly, drew out their swords and made their stand clear. Looking at his fellow disciples who fully supported him, Xiao Mo's eyes reddened, touched by the bonds of his fellow disciples. "Wuxia world. Sight, you said you'll let all of us go as long as I apologize?" Xiao Mo took a deep breath. A man should have dignity and not bow down, not to mention the insult of crawling between one's legs. However, this incident was started because of him, and his fellow disciples were already suffering together with him. Since they had the heart of protecting him, how could he drag them into danger? That's right. I live up to my words. As long as you apologize obediently, we Wind Sword sect disciples are not unreasonable, the Wind Sword sect disciple said with a raised brow. The Xianling sect disciples looked at Qiao Mo in shock, and their faces were agitated. Junior brother Qiao, you must not do it. How could they tolerate others insulting their fellow disciple right before their eyes? As everyone was about to persuade Qiao Mo, Lu Xiuwen suddenly spoke. It cannot be better that Qiao Mo knows clearly the right thing to do and the principles to follow. Senior brothers, why bother going against Qiao Mo's painstaking decision? This was originally started by him, and now that he can shoulder everything by himself, what is there to not do? Lu Xiuwen, shut up. A Xianling sect disciple glared at Lu Xiuwen angrily. If not for the situation, he would have really killed the heartless betrayer that is Lu Xiuwen. Senior brother Lu didn't say anything wrong. It was Qiao Mo who acted rashly and offended the Wind Sword sect disciple, which caused us to be in such a hopeless situation. Is there anything wrong if he apologizes now? Su Wan echoed. As the Xianling sect disciples argued amongst themselves, the Wind Sword sect disciples snickered as they watched the show. It seems that there are some logical people in Xianling sect as well. It was a casual sentence, but the sarcasm was exceptionally obvious. They were clearly disciples of the same sect, yet they persuaded a fellow disciple to be insulted in fear of being implicated. Such a thing would never happen in their Wind Sword sect. Everyone, my mind is set. I am the one who implicated everyone in this matter. Qiao Mo took a deep breath and walked forward, looking coldly at the Wind Sword sect disciple who lifted a leg and was waiting for him to crawl under. Junior brother Qiao, Wuxia World. Sight some Xianling sect disciples wanted to stop him, but Qiao Mo had already made up his mind. Shutting his eyes in resignation, he bent his knees and kneeled on the ground. The mockery in the Wind Sword sect disciples' eyes deepened as they waited for Qiao Mo to humiliate himself. However, as Qiao Mo's knees were about to touch the ground, there was a cold sensation on his knees suddenly. Qiao Mo opened his eyes in surprise and suddenly saw a sword was placed across his knees, which supported his knees up straight. Shock flashed past Qiao Mo's eyes. He looked up and saw a stunning girl in a Xianling sect uniform was standing beside him with a smile while the handle of that sword was in her hands. A man should have dignity and not bow down. How can our Xianling sect disciple kneel down so easily? A casual voice along with a cool breeze entered everyone's ears. On that exquisite face, her cherry-red lips were curled into an evil smile. Chapter 366, Mighty Senior Sister, 1. Who are you? The Wind Sword sect disciple saw that the outcome was about to be settled and did not expect such a thing to happen. That girl tilted her head slightly as her bright eyes glanced across the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. The Wind Sword sect disciple wanted to berate the girl but was suddenly stopped by his companion. Don't speak carelessly. That is Xianling sect's inner sect disciple. What? The Wind Sword sect disciple fixed his eyes on her. Although the girl was wearing Xianling sect's uniform, it was different from that of Qiao Mo's and the rest, with the most obvious difference being the embroidery that symbolized an inner sect disciple in front of her chest. This look caused the group of Wind Sword sect disciples to pale. Inner sect disciple. They were only a group of outer sect disciples from Wind Sword sect, and as sect disciples, how would they now know the world of differences between the inner and outer sect? It's Senior Sister Yi. A Xianling sect disciple recognized that girl with just a look and was shocked. It's Yi Qingtang? Senior Sister Yi? The moment the Xianling sect disciples saw Yi Qingtang, it was as though they saw a ray of light in their darkness of despair. Qiao Mo fell into a trance as he looked at Yi Qingtang with his mouth hung open. What are you still doing there? Do you want me to help you up? Yi Qingtang raised a brow at the absent-minded Qiao Mo. Qiao Mo stood up frantically and looked at Yi Qingtang with admiration and respect. The Blood Moon sect elder beside Yi Qingtang scanned the situation, and the corners of his lips tugged up. He still thought that the disappearance of these disciples was related to the Blood Moon sect, but now it seemed that they were just cornered by other sects' disciples. Senior Sister Yi. Seeing Yi Qingtang, an inner sect disciple, the Xianling sect disciples surrounded her as though they had found a mainstay and looked at her with eyes full of respect. Yi Qingtang nodded slightly. When she saw Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan, there was not a slight change in her expression. She merely glimpsed past them as though they were completely unacquainted. Yi Qingtang's sudden appearance caught both Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan by surprise. Especially when Xiao Mo and the rest surrounded Yi Qingtang with a look of admiration, Lu Ziyuan's face darkened in an instant. Yi Qingtang simply did not bother with Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan as her eyes were directly fixed on the Windsword sect disciples. What were you all doing just now? Yi Qingtang's tone was neither warm nor cold, but to the Windsword sect disciples, that emotionless voice was like a rumble of thunder that caused their hearts to quiver. No, nothing much. Upon meeting Yi Qingtang, an inner sect disciple, all arrogance was gone in the Windsword sect disciples, who were previously blustering and truculent. Expressions of uneasiness were etched on their faces. They initially thought that these dumb fools from Xianling sect would definitely be toyed around by them. But who would expect that it would actually alarm Xianling sect's inner sect disciple? And how would they be unaware of the frightening skills that inner sect disciples possessed? Even if all of them went up against her together, it was probably not enough to restrain that one girl. Moreover, there was still another inner sect disciple beside her. Just these two people were enough for them to be unable to bear the consequences of failure. Nothing much. Yi Qingtang raised a brow as she took a glimpse at Xiao Mo, whose complexion had not recovered to normal. Chapter 367. Mighty Senior Sister, 2. Nothing much, and yet, you dared to make my Xianling sect disciple kneel to you? How bold of you! Yi Qingtang's voice deepened as she spoke. The coldness in her voice caused the Windsword sect disciples to break out in cold sweat in fear. It's not it. It's your Xianling sect disciples who started arguing with us first. Thus, we had a conflict. A Windsword sect disciple mustered his courage and said, "This was also the truth in reality." Oh! Yi Qingtang glanced at a few Xianling sect disciples. What happened exactly? Xiao Mo and the rest obviously did not dare to conceal anything and recounted the incident fully without leaving out any details. After hearing the account, Yi Qingtang swept a look across the Windsword sect disciples' faces. It was a brief glance, but the look in her eyes caused goosebumps to rise on all the Windsword sect disciples. So, you want my junior brother to crawl between your legs and then kowtow to you in apology? Yi Qingtang said coldly, but when she finished her sentence, her eyes suddenly sharpened. She drew out her demonic blood sword angrily. The demonic blood sword which was just strengthened was dangerously imposing. The moment it left its scabbard, a cold air spread in the air. The Windsword sect disciples' legs wobbled in fear at the sight. This was the skill of an inner sect disciple. Before making a strike, they were already exuding such a terrifying and overbearing force. The Windsword sect disciples' faces paled instantly, and they did not even dare to let out a fart. Looking at Yi Qingtang, warmth spread in the hearts of Xiao Mo and the rest. Thinking about how they were tightly chased by the Windsword sect disciples for these few days, did they still dare to act so arrogantly to them with Senior Sister Yi here right now? Yi Qingtang's back view was originally tiny, but at that instant, it seemed extremely tall and large. But, are you bullying us because you think our Xianling sect is lacking? Yi Qingtang scoffed. The Windsword sect disciples were about to vomit in fear from Yi Qingtang's aura but did not dare to retort and only shook their heads violently. It was just a casual talk, yet how dare you corner my junior brothers and not let them go for days? How should I settle this score? Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. The Windsword sect disciples were so close to weeping. A casual talk? How was it a casual talk? It was clearly Xiao Mo who started the fight. Why did it seem like they intentionally stirred up trouble when Yi Qingtang said it? But they did not dare to argue at that instant. The other party was an inner sect disciple and was on a completely different level from them. When they saw inner sect disciples on usual days, all of them were extremely respectful and cautious. This senior sister over here. You can settle it however you want. The Wind Sword sect disciples were really frightened then. Yi Qingtang was not anxious to reply and instead turned around to look at Xiao Emo and the rest. How are your injuries? Their injuries were not severe and were mostly external injuries. It was just that they seemed rather miserable after being chased. They were about to speak, but Yi Qingtang turned around by herself and spoke to the Wind Sword sect disciples. You all caused my junior brothers to be so heavily injured and delayed their return to the sect to submit their mission. Of course, you all must compensate for their loss. The Wind Sword sect disciples' eyes were about to pop out. Heavily injured? How were they heavily injured? Xiao Emo and the rest were dumbfounded. Where did senior sister Yi see that they were heavily injured? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.